At 2 a.m., standing in the rain outside a Chicago skyscraper, Zephrine Vale stared at a wedding invitation with her own name printed as the bride. For a ceremony she'd spent 6 months planning without knowing she was designing her own trap. The groom? Cassian Rhee, the beautiful, dangerous man who'd hired her, manipulated her, and somehow made her fall in love while orchestrating an elaborate lie that could destroy everything she believed about trust and control. One choice remained: walk away from the best and worst thing that ever happened to her, or marry the man who proved love and deception could wear the same face. If you want to see how deep this obsession goes, stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The debt collector called at 9:47 on a Tuesday morning, while Zephrine Vale was on her knees scrubbing dried champagne off the floor of her event studio. She didn't answer. The phone buzzed against the scarred hardwood, rattling like an angry hornet while she worked the bristles into a stain that had been there since Saturday's disaster wedding. The bride had thrown a glass at her maid of honor. The groom's mother had threatened legal action over floral arrangements. Z had worked 16 hours straight fixing catastrophes that weren't her fault, then watched half her payment vanish when the couple disputed the final invoice. The phone went silent, then immediately started ringing again. Z sat back on her heels, pushed sweaty hair off her forehead, and stared at the screen. Midwest Recovery Services. 4th call this week. She'd stopped answering after the second one, when the woman on the other end had used that specific tone of voice, not quite cruel but sharp enough to cut, while explaining exactly how bankruptcy worked. The studio around her told the whole story. Exposed brick walls that had looked charmingly industrial 2 years ago now just looked unfinished. Furniture she'd bought secondhand and refinished herself, back when she still believed in her own design instincts. A corner office area with a desk buried under unpaid invoices, vendor contracts she could no longer honor, and a laptop that crashed twice a day because she couldn't afford to replace it. Outside the tall windows, Chicago's West Loop glittered in morning sun. Restaurants and galleries and converted lofts where people with actual money lived actual successful lives. Z had moved here thinking proximity to that world would somehow pull her into it. Stupid. The phone stopped ringing. Z went back to scrubbing. Her business, Vale Events, named in a moment of optimistic branding that now felt like a sick joke, had been dying for 8 months. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Clients canceling, vendors refusing credit, her assistant quitting for a corporate job with benefits. The breaking point had come last month when her landlord taped an eviction warning to the studio door. She had 30 days to catch up on rent or lose the space entirely, which meant losing everything. Her phone buzzed again. Not a call this time. An email notification. Z almost ignored it. Then she saw the sender line. Confidential inquiry. Urgent project. No name, no company, just that subject line and a message time-stamped 6 minutes ago. She sat cross-legged on the floor, pulled the laptop across the stained hardwood, and opened the email. Ms. Vale, your work has been brought to our attention. We represent a private client seeking event planning services for a high-profile wedding. The project requires absolute discretion, exceptional design capability, and immediate availability. Compensation: $500,000 paid in 3 installments. First payment upon contract signing. If you are interested, respond to this email within 24 hours to schedule a preliminary meeting. Regards, Executive Services Group Z. Read it twice. Then a third time, slower, looking for the scam. $500,000 for one wedding. The kind of money that didn't just solve problems, it erased them completely. Paid every debt, saved the business, bought her another year to figure out how to survive. Too good to be real. She checked the sender's email address. Corporate domain. Professional signature line. She copied the company name into Google and found a bare-bones website listing private consulting services with no details and an office address in downtown Chicago's financial district. Legitimate, maybe. Or an extremely well-constructed trap. Z looked around the studio, looked at the stack of final notices on her desk, looked at the scrub brush in her hand and the champagne stain that wasn't coming out no matter how hard she worked. She typed a response before she could talk herself out of it. I'm interested. When can we meet? The reply came 14 minutes later. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Address below. Come alone. bring portfolio, and NDA signature. Yeah. Z spent the next 26 hours in controlled panic. She printed her portfolio on the studio's dying printer, assembled it into a leather binder she'd used exactly twice, and rehearsed her pitch in the mirror until the words sounded almost natural. She tried on 4 different outfits before settling on the black dress she usually saved for client meetings. Professional, confident, not quite hiding the fact that she'd lost weight from stress and forgotten to eat regular meals. The address led her to a glass tower in the Loop that looked like it cost more per floor than her entire neighborhood. Z stood on the sidewalk staring up at it, heart hammering against her ribs. This was insane. She'd responded to an anonymous email from a company she couldn't verify, agreeing to sign a non-disclosure agreement before even knowing who she'd be working for. Every true crime podcast she'd ever listened to started exactly this way. But bankruptcy wasn't theoretical anymore. It was waiting for her back at the studio, patient and inevitable. She walked through the revolving door. The lobby swallowed her into cold marble and steel. A security desk sat dead center, staffed by 2 men in suits who looked former military. One of them checked her ID against a visitor list, made a phone call, then directed her toward a private elevator bank in the back. 43rd floor, he said. They're expecting you. The elevator rose so fast her stomach lurched. When the doors opened, she stepped into a reception area that didn't match any corporate office she'd ever seen. Dark wood panels, low leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Everything designed to intimidate without looking like it was trying. A woman in her 50s sat behind a reception desk, perfectly composed, with the kind of beauty that came from money and maintenance. "Ms. Vale," she said, not a question. "Right on time. Mr. Ree will see you now." She gestured toward a hallway. Z followed it into a corner office that felt more like a gallery than a workspace. Minimal furniture. Expensive art that probably meant something to people who understood expensive art. Windows on 2 walls offering views that made Chicago look like a scale model of itself. A man stood with his back to the door looking out over the city. He turned when she entered, and Z forgot how to breathe properly. Cassian Ree looked like someone had taken the concept of devastating and given it a custom suit. Korean features, perfect bone structure, dark hair pushed back from a face that belonged in magazines selling things regular people couldn't afford. Mid-30s, maybe. Hard to tell. He had one of those faces that could pass for younger but carried weight behind the eyes. He didn't smile. "Ms. Vale," he said, voice like smoke. "Thank you for coming." Z managed to nod, managed to shake his hand when he offered it. His grip was firm, brief, impersonal. He gestured toward a chair in front of his desk. She sat. He remained standing, studying her with dark eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. "I assume you have questions," Cassian said. "A few hundred," Z admitted, "starting with who you are and ending with why you're offering me more money than I've made in my entire career." "Fair." He moved around the desk, sat down across from her, and folded his hands with careful precision. "I represent a private client who requires a wedding planner. Someone talented. Someone desperate enough to accept unusual terms without asking uncomfortable questions." "That's me," Z said. "Talented and desperate. Your email had me at $500,000. Something flickered across his face. Not quite amusement, not quite approval. "The compensation reflects the difficulty," Cassian said. "This isn't a standard wedding. The client requires absolute secrecy. No social media, no public portfolio pieces. You'll sign an NDA that prohibits you from ever discussing the project or identifying anyone involved." "Okay." "You'll work exclusively on this project for the next 6 months." "Okay." "And you won't know the bride's identity until much closer to the event." Z blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "The groom hasn't finalized his choice yet." The words landed wrong, like they'd been translated from a language that didn't quite match reality. "Let me make sure I understand," Z said slowly. "You want me to plan a complete wedding for a bride who hasn't been chosen yet?" "Correct. That's insane." "Yes," Cassian agreed, "which is why the compensation is significant." Z leaned back in her chair trying to process. "How am I supposed to design anything without knowing the bride? Her taste, her style, her preferences?" "You'll receive that information gradually," Cassian interrupted. "Through me. I'll gather the necessary details and relay them to you as needed. That's not how wedding planning works. It's how this one will work. His tone left no room for negotiation. Z studied him, trying to find the trap, the catch, the moment where this stopped being weird and started being dangerous. Who's getting married? She asked. That's confidential. Is this legal? Completely. Is the bride aware she's being married? Cassian's expression didn't change. You're asking the wrong questions. What are the right questions? Will you accept the job or not? Z looked down at her portfolio, sitting useless on the desk between them. She thought about the studio, the debt collectors, the eviction notice, the slow, inevitable collapse of everything she'd tried to build. I need the first payment immediately, she said, before I sign anything. Proof this isn't a scam. Done. Cassian pulled a folder from his desk drawer and slid it across. Contract. NDA. Bank transfer instructions for the initial payment of $150,000. Once you sign, the money will be in your account within the hour. Z opened the folder with shaking hands. The contract ran 12 pages, dense with legal language she barely understood. The NDA ran another 6. She scanned the terms, looking for the obvious poison pill. She didn't find it. Just standard confidentiality language, penalty clauses for breach, and a payout structure that seemed almost absurdly generous. Why me? She asked without looking up. There are 1,000 planners in Chicago with better portfolios and actual solvent businesses. You're talented, Cassian said. I've seen your work. The Morrison wedding last spring, the Anderson anniversary in August. You create beauty under impossible circumstances while quietly preventing disasters most people never notice. Z looked up sharply. You've been watching my events? I've been watching you. The words should have sounded creepy. Instead, they sounded matter-of-fact, clinical, like surveillance was just another business practice. That's not comforting, Z said. It wasn't meant to be. Cassian leaned forward slightly. I need someone talented enough to create something extraordinary and desperate enough not to ask questions that don't concern them. You meet both requirements. Desperate, Z repeated. You keep using that word. You prefer a different one? I prefer honesty about what I'm actually signing up for. You're signing up to plan a wedding, Cassian said. An extremely private, well-compensated wedding that will require discretion and skill. Everything else is details. Z held his gaze, trying to read something beneath the perfect control. She couldn't. He'd built walls behind his eyes and reinforced them until nothing leaked through, which meant he was hiding something. But she was drowning, and he'd just thrown her a life preserver made of money and secrets. I'll need to review this with a lawyer, Z said. You don't have a lawyer. How do you, She stopped. Right. Because he'd been watching her, which meant he knew exactly how broke she was, how desperate, how easy to manipulate. Sign the contract, Cassian said quietly. Save your business, or walk out of here and watch it die. Z picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. Every instinct screamed that she was about to make a catastrophic mistake, that accepting money from a beautiful stranger who'd been surveilling her events was exactly the kind of decision that destroyed lives. But the alternative was bankruptcy, eviction, failure. She signed. Cassian took the folder back, countersigned both documents, and handed her a copy. Your first payment will arrive within the hour. I'll send project details tonight. When do I meet the groom? You don't. I don't meet the person I'm planning a wedding for? You already have. Cassian stood, straightening his suit jacket with practiced ease. I'll be your primary contact throughout this project. All communication goes through me. Any questions, any updates, any decisions, you bring them to me and only me. Z stood as well, clutching her portfolio like armor. This is the strangest client relationship I've ever had. Yes, Cassian agreed. It is. He walked her to the door. She expected him to shake her hand again, maintain that professional distance. Instead, he looked at her for a long moment with an expression she couldn't quite read. Thank you for taking the risk, he said finally. Then he closed the door. But the money appeared in her account at 3:47 that afternoon. Z was back at the studio, pacing between her desk and the windows, checking her phone every 90 seconds. When the notification finally came through, deposit $150,000, she sat down on the floor and started crying. Not from relief, from the sudden, overwhelming weight of understanding exactly how desperate she'd become. Desperate enough to sign away her autonomy to a stranger. Desperate enough to ignore every warning sign because the alternative was worse. She wiped her face, opened her banking app, transferred payment to her landlord, set up automatic payments for the debt collectors, sent money to vendors she owed, watched the account balance drop from financial salvation to merely comfortable. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. That night, sitting cross-legged on her apartment floor with cold pizza and cheaper wine, Z opened the encrypted email Cassian had sent. Project timeline. 6 months to wedding date. Venue selection begins immediately. Budget? No limit. Style parameters. Elegant, intimate, timeless. Additional details to follow. First question. What flowers remind you of home? Z stared at the screen. That wasn't a detail you asked about a mystery bride. That was personal, specific. The kind of thing you asked someone when you wanted to know them. She typed back, garden roses. My mom grew them. Why? The response came 30 minutes later. Noted. Next meeting, Thursday, 7 p.m. My office. Bring venue options. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the strange intimacy in his question. Z closed the laptop and looked around her apartment. Barely furnished, barely decorated, barely home after 2 years. She'd poured everything into the business, into proving she could build something real from nothing. Now she'd gambled it all on a man who watched her from shadows and asked questions about flowers. Thursday arrived wrapped in November cold. Z showed up at Cassian's office at exactly 7, carrying a presentation folder with 8 venue options ranging from museum galleries to private estates. She'd spent 2 days researching, calling, and assembling proposals for spaces that matched elegant, intimate, timeless, without knowing anything else about who would occupy them. The reception area was empty this time. No assistant, no security. Just Cassian standing in the hallway waiting for her, still wearing a suit but with his tie loosened slightly. The first hint of casualness she'd seen from him. Right on time, he said. They worked in his office for 3 hours. Z presented each venue with photos and layouts while Cassian listened without interrupting, processing information like a computer running complex calculations. He asked sharp questions about logistics, capacity, acoustics. He eliminated 4 options immediately based on factors Z would never have considered: proximity to certain roads, visibility from specific buildings, security vulnerabilities she didn't understand. This one, he said finally, tapping a photo of a renovated industrial space in the West Loop. Exposed brick and steel beams, walls of windows overlooking the city. Confirm availability and put down a deposit. Done, Z said, making notes. Cassian stood and moved toward a sidebar where expensive bottles of alcohol lived like art installations. He poured 2 glasses of something amber without asking if she wanted one. Tell me about the Morrison wedding, he said, handing her a glass. Z took it reflexively. What about it? You prevented a disaster. I want to know how. The officiant didn't show up, Z said. Got food poisoning. I had 45 minutes to find a replacement before the ceremony started. Called every contact I had until I found a retired judge who lived 10 minutes away. Convinced him to get dressed and show up. Nobody at the wedding knew anything went wrong. Why didn't you tell the couple? Because they didn't need that stress on their wedding day. My job isn't to dump problems on clients. It's to solve them quietly. Cassian studied her over his glass. You're good under pressure. I'm good at hiding panic. Same thing. Z took a sip. Whiskey. Good whiskey. The kind that cost more than her monthly rent used to. Why do you care about the Morrison wedding? She asked. Because I was there. The words landed heavy. Z tried to remember the guest list, the faces in the crowd. Hundreds of people. She'd been too busy managing logistics to notice individuals. You were watching me, Z said. Yes. That's creepy. I don't disagree. Cassian sat on the edge of his desk, closer than professional distance required. But accurate. I saw how you moved through that event, how you fixed problems nobody else noticed, how you created beauty while your world was falling apart. You don't know anything about my world. I know your business is failing. I know you're drowning in debt. I know you haven't taken a real day off in 8 months, and you eat maybe one proper meal a day when you remember. He paused. I know you're talented and desperate and stubborn enough to make this impossible project work. Z set her glass down with a sharp click. You investigated me. Thoroughly. That's smart, Cassian interrupted. I don't hire people without understanding them first. Is that what this is? Hiring? Among other things. The room got smaller, or maybe Cassian got closer. Z couldn't tell anymore. His proximity carried weight that had nothing to do with physical space. What other things? She asked. I haven't decided yet. He moved back toward the windows, broke the tension like snapping a wire. Z exhaled without meaning to. Next question, Cassian said, looking out over the city lights. What music makes you cry? What? For the ceremony. What music hits you emotionally? Z shook her head. Again, you're asking me personal questions about a bride I haven't met. Humor me. Cassian. Answer the question. His tone shifted, not quite commanding, but close. The kind of voice someone used when they expected obedience. Zay bristled. Cello, live cello, specifically Yo-Yo Ma playing the swan. Happy now? Yes. Cassian made a note on his phone. I'll book a cellist. This is insane, Z said. You can't plan a wedding by asking me what I like. Why not? Because I'm not the bride. Cassian turned from the window, looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Aren't you? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Z stood. I should go. We're not finished. Yes, we are. She gathered her folder, her coat, her rapidly deteriorating sense of reality. Send me the next round of questions by email. I'll respond professionally, during business hours, in my office. Cassian didn't stop her, but he watched her walk to the door with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. Z, he said as she reached the threshold. She stopped, didn't turn around. Thank you for trusting me. I don't trust you, Z said. I trust your money. She walked out before he could respond. The project consumed her life. Over the next 8 weeks, Z worked 16-hour days designing every element of a wedding that made less sense the deeper she got into it. Cassian sent questions at strange hours, encrypted messages arriving at midnight, dawn, during lunch when she'd almost convinced herself to eat something. What colors feel like love? What food reminds you of celebration? What fabric feels like comfort? She answered them all, slowly realizing that every response shaped the event in increasingly personal directions. Her favorite flowers became centerpieces. Her comfort music became the ceremony soundtrack. Her aesthetic preferences became the design language. Meanwhile, Cassian appeared at her studio with increasing frequency. At first, he scheduled meetings. Then he started showing up unannounced with coffee and questions about tablecloth textures. Their sessions stretched later into the night, drifting from logistics into something that felt dangerously intimate. Z learned fragments of him slowly. The Ree family owned significant real estate across Chicago. They'd built an empire from nothing 3 generations back, though Cassian remained vague about the specifics. He lived alone in a downtown penthouse. He worked constantly. He never mentioned friends or relationships or anything resembling a personal life. And he watched Z like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever encountered. You don't talk about yourself, she said one night while they reviewed floral arrangements at her studio. February cold pressed against the windows. They sat on her office floor surrounded by fabric samples and photos. Neither do you, Cassian replied. I'm an open book. You're a locked vault pretending to be a book. He sorted through rose varieties with careful hands. You never mention family. Never talk about relationships. Never explain why you pour everything into a failing business instead of walking away. Because walking away means I failed. No. It means you tried something difficult and it didn't work. Failure is giving up before you know the outcome. Then what do you call what I'm doing? Z asked. Taking money from a stranger to plan a wedding that doesn't make sense? Survival. Cassian looked up. You're doing what you have to do to keep going. There's no shame in that. His voice carried something that sounded almost like empathy, like he understood desperation from the inside. Z wanted to ask about it, wanted to dig beneath the controlled surface and find the person hiding underneath. But Cassian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite fear, something colder. "I have to go," he said, standing. "Everything okay?" "Yes." But the way he said it meant no. He left without explanation. Z sat alone in her studio, surrounded by wedding plans for a mystery bride, wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The truth came 3 weeks later. Z arrived at a tasting with one of Chicago's most exclusive caterers, a private kitchen in a converted warehouse where dinner cost more than most people's mortgages. She expected to meet Cassian there. Instead, she found him sitting across from an older Korean man who shared his bone structure but none of his composure. They weren't speaking. They were having the kind of argument that happened in perfect silence, body language sharp, eyes locked, tension thick enough to choke on. Z hesitated in the doorway. Cassian saw her. Something crossed his face that looked almost like relief. "Z," he said, "come in. Meet my father." The older man turned, evaluated her with eyes that calculated her worth in seconds, and found her lacking. "This is her?" he said in English, but with an accent that suggested he preferred not to use it. "This is Zephyrin Vale," Cassian confirmed. "She's planning the event." His father stood, extended a hand that felt like shaking ice. "Marcus Ree." "Nice to meet you," Z lied. Marcus smiled without warmth. "My son has expensive taste in consultants." "The project requires quality," Cassian said. "The project," Marcus repeated, "requires discretion." "Does she understand that?" "She signed an NDA." "NDA?" Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think paper means anything in this family?" Cassian's jaw tightened. "We're finished here." "No, we are not finished." Marcus moved closer to Z, studying her face. "How much is he paying you?" "That's between me and my client," Z said. "Your client." Marcus glanced at Cassian. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Father is..." "She doesn't know, does she?" Marcus interrupted. "She has no idea who she's working for." The room got very quiet. Z looked between them, trying to follow a conversation that made no sense. "Know what?" Marcus smiled at her, then at his son. "Tell her, Cassian. Tell her what the Ree family actually does." Cassian stood. "We're leaving." "We built empires," Marcus continued, ignoring him. "We own half this city. Politicians answer our calls. Competitors disappear when they become inconvenient. And my son thinks he can build something legitimate while pretending his last name means nothing." Z's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "He's talking about a past that doesn't define me," Cassian said quietly. "No," Marcus said. "I'm talking about a present you're trying to escape by playing house with strangers." He walked out. The silence he left behind felt radioactive. Z turned to Cassian slowly. "What did he mean?" "It doesn't matter." "Cassian, it doesn't matter," he repeated, harder. "My family's history has nothing to do with this project." "Your family's criminal history," Z corrected. Cassian looked at her for a long moment. Then he moved to the bar, poured himself a drink, and drank it standing at the window. "The Ree family has complex business interests," he said finally. "Some legitimate, some less so. I've spent the last 5 years trying to extract myself from the less legitimate parts. By planning mystery weddings? By building something that belongs to me, not them." I tried to process, tried to make sense of expensive suits and encrypted messages and surveillance that suddenly felt a lot less corporate and a lot more dangerous. "I should leave," she said. "Probably." "I should quit this project." "Probably." "Why aren't you stopping me?" Cassian turned from the window. "Because I don't want you here if you're scared of me." "I didn't say I was scared." "You should be." The honesty hit harder than any lie could have. Z grabbed her coat and walked toward the door. "Z," Cassian said. She stopped. "I've never lied to you," he said. "Not once. I've avoided certain truths, but I've never lied. Is that supposed to comfort me?" "No. It's supposed to show you that I'm trying to be someone different than my father thinks I am." Z looked back at him, standing alone in that expensive room with his expensive drink and his expensive secrets. Try harder, she said. Then she left. She made it 6 blocks before her phone buzzed. Email from Cassian's encrypted account. Second payment is being transferred now. $175,000. Enough to finish this project or walk away entirely. Your choice. Either way, you've earned it. Z stopped on the sidewalk while Chicago's winter wind tore through her coat. $325,000 total. More than enough to save her business permanently. More than enough to build something stable for the first time in her adult life. The money appeared in her account 4 minutes later. Z stood there in the cold, staring at her phone screen, and realized exactly what Cassian had done. He'd given her enough money that she could choose to stay without needing to. Could choose him without desperation forcing her hand, which meant if she kept working on this project, it would be real. She typed back, "Send me the cake tasting schedule, and next time your father shows up, give me a warning." His response came immediately. "Does this mean you're staying?" Z looked up at the city lights reflecting off glass towers where men like Cassian lived in penthouses and played complicated games with people who didn't know the rules. "For now," she typed. "But Cassian? Yes? If you're lying to me, I'll find out. And when I do, all the money in the world won't be enough to fix what I'll do to your reputation." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Understood," he finally replied. "Thursday, 8 p.m. Cake tasting at my office. Come hungry." Z put her phone away and started walking home. She had no idea what she'd just agreed to continue, but she was going to find out. The cake tasting happened in Cassian's office on a Thursday night when the rest of the building had emptied into weekend cold and the city below glittered like broken glass scattered across black velvet. Z arrived at 8, carrying her portfolio and a determination to keep this professional, transactional. She'd taken his money. She'd finished the job. Then she'd walk away from whatever complicated mess the Ree family represented. Simple. The elevator doors opened directly into his office suite, a detail she hadn't noticed before. No hallways, no escape routes. Just straight from public space into his private territory. Cassian stood by the windows wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. First time she'd seen him without a jacket. The casualness felt more intimate than it should have. "You came," he said. "You're paying me $500,000, Z replied. "I came." 3 patisserie boxes sat on the conference table alongside wine bottles and 2 place settings that looked like they cost more than her car. Cassian gestured toward a chair. Z sat. He opened the first box, revealing 6 miniature cakes, each a different flavor and design. Vanilla bean with lavender buttercream, chocolate with salted caramel, lemon elderflower with white chocolate ganache. They looked like edible architecture. "Try the chocolate first," Cassian said, cutting a piece with a silver fork. "Why?" "Because it's your favorite." Z froze with her own fork halfway to a vanilla sample. "I never told you that." "You didn't have to. Every wedding you've planned for the last 18 months includes a chocolate element, dessert bar, groom's cake, favors. It's a pattern. That's called client preference." "No." Cassian slid the chocolate slice toward her. "That's called your preference influencing every decision you make." Z took the plate, took a bite. The cake melted across her tongue, rich and dark with salt cutting through the sweetness. Perfect. Exactly what she would have chosen for herself. "You're doing it again," she said. "Doing what?" "Asking questions about me instead of the bride." "Humor me." "No." Z set her fork down with deliberate control. "We're going to talk about who I'm actually planning this wedding for. Right now. Or I'm leaving." Cassian poured wine into both glasses, drank his without responding. "Cassian, what do you want to know?" he interrupted. "Everything. Who's getting married? Why the secrecy? Why you're treating this like a classified military operation instead of a wedding? Some questions don't have simple answers." "Try." Cassian studied the wine in his glass like it held instructions. "The groom is someone important to my family's business interests. The marriage is being arranged to secure certain alliances. The bride hasn't been finalized because there are multiple candidates under consideration." The words came out smooth, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this explanation knowing she'd eventually demand it. Z laughed without humor. An arranged marriage in Chicago in 2024. You'd be surprised how common they still are in certain circles. Circles like yours. Yes. So this is a business transaction. Most marriages are, Cassian said. This one is just more honest about it. Z grabbed her wine and drank half of it in one swallow. And what's your role in this transaction? Best man, family representative, wedding planner supervisor? Complicated. Uncomplicated. Cassian set his glass down and looked at her directly. I'm responsible for ensuring the wedding happens smoothly. That means managing every detail from venue to vendors to the bride's eventual cooperation. Cooperation? Z repeated the word slowly. You make it sound like she might not want to get married. She might not. Jesus Christ. Z stood up, paced to the windows, stared down at the city trying to process what she was hearing. You're planning a wedding for a woman who hasn't agreed to it yet. She'll agree. How do you know? Because the alternative is worse for everyone involved. Z turned. What does that mean? Cassian didn't answer, just watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes that gave away nothing, and somehow revealed everything. I'm planning a forced marriage, Z said. That's what this is. You're planning a wedding, Cassian corrected. What happens before or after isn't your concern. Not my concern. Z moved back to the table, planted both hands on the surface and leaned toward him. You paid me $500,000 to design a beautiful prison, and you think I'm just going to keep doing it without asking questions? Yes. Cassian's voice dropped lower, quieter, more dangerous. Because you already cashed the checks. Because your business depends on this money. Because walking away now means admitting you were complicit in something you found morally objectionable. The words hit like a physical blow. He was right. She'd taken the money, used it to pay debts and save her business and build stability. She was already complicit, already trapped. I should have walked away the first day, Z said. But you didn't. I should walk away now. You won't. Z grabbed her coat off the chair. Watch me. She made it to the elevator before Cassian's voice stopped her. The bride is you. Z's hand froze on the elevator call button. She turned slowly. Cassian stood in the doorway of his office, backlit by the city lights behind him, looking like guilt and beauty had formed a temporary alliance. What did you say? Z asked. The bride, Cassian repeated quietly, is you. The hallway tilted. Z grabbed the wall for balance. That's not funny. It's not a joke. Cassian, every question I asked was about you. Every detail you chose was for you. The flowers, the music, the venue, the cake. He moved toward her slowly, like approaching something wild that might bolt. I've been planning your wedding for 6 months. My wedding. Z's voice came out strangled. To who? Cassian stopped 3 feet away. To me. The world narrowed to his face, his eyes, the absolute certainty in his expression. You're insane, Z whispered. Probably. This whole thing was, what, some kind of elaborate manipulation? Yes. The honesty was worse than a lie would have been. Zay's hands shook. She shoved them in her coat pockets to hide it. Why? She asked. Because I saw you at the Morrison wedding, Cassian said. Watched you fix disasters while your own life fell apart. Watched you create beauty for strangers while you couldn't afford to eat regular meals. And I became obsessed with understanding how someone so talented could be drowning so completely. So you decided to save me? No, I decided to know you. By lying to me for 6 months? By giving you a reason to let me close. Cassian's composure cracked slightly, voice roughening. If I'd approached you honestly, told you who I was, what my family does, what I wanted, you would have run immediately. I'm not stupid enough to think otherwise. So you built an elaborate con instead. I built an opportunity for us to know each other without the weight of expectation destroying everything before it started. Ze laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off marble walls. Expectation? You mean without me knowing you were planning to marry me against my will? Not against your will, Cassian said. I've never touched you without permission, never forced anything. Every moment we've spent together, every conversation, every late-night planning session, those were real. You chose to be there every time. Because you were paying me. At first, yes, but not lately. He moved closer. Z's back hit the wall. You've been showing up at midnight with coffee and questions about centerpieces. You've been texting me design ideas at 3 in the morning. You've been looking at me like, don't, Z interrupted. Like you feel what I feel. Stop. Tell me I'm wrong. Cassian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Tell me you haven't thought about what would happen if this stopped being about a wedding and started being about us. Z's heart hammered against her ribs. There is no us. There's a con artist and his mark. I've never lied to you. You've done nothing but lie to me. No. Cassian's chin came up to the wall beside her head, not touching her, just boxing her in. I've avoided certain truths, but every conversation we've had has been real. Every moment, every word. I told you I was falling for someone I shouldn't. I told you I was trying to build something legitimate. I told you I wanted to be different than my father. You told me half-truths dressed up as honesty, better than pretty lies. His face was inches from hers now, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell expensive cologne mixed with something warmer underneath. I wanted you to know me before you knew about me. Is that so unforgivable? Yes, Z said, but the word came out weak, uncertain, because he was right about one thing. She had been showing up at midnight, had been texting him design ideas when she couldn't sleep, had been looking at him like maybe this fake project was covering something real underneath. I should hate you, she said. You should. I should report you to, I don't even know who, the police, the FBI, wedding ethics board, all of the above. Why aren't you scared? Because you won't. Cassian's free hand came up to her face, stopped just before touching, hovering, waiting for permission. Because part of you wants to know what happens next. That's ego talking. That's truth. Z grabbed his wrist, meant to push him away, found herself holding on instead. His pulse beat fast beneath her fingers, fast enough to prove he wasn't as controlled as he pretended. What happens next? She asked. You choose. Choose what? Whether this was the worst mistake I ever made. Cassian's thumb brushed across her cheek so lightly it could have been imagined. Or the only honest thing I've done in my entire life. Z's breath caught. She wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to push him away and call a lawyer and burn this whole situation down. Instead, she kissed him, hard and angry and desperate, tasting wine and chocolate and 6 months of tension finally detonating. Cassian made a sound low in his throat, surprise or relief or surrender, and kissed her back like he'd been starving for it. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her against him. Z's fingers tangled in his hair, nails scraping his scalp hard enough to hurt. It wasn't romantic. It was furious. A fight disguised as intimacy. Cassian backed her against the wall, mouth moving to her throat, teeth grazing skin. Z gasped and pulled him closer, even while her brain screamed that this was insane, that she was kissing the man who'd manipulated her, that everything about this was wrong, but wrong had never felt this good. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Cassian ignored it, kissed her harder. The phone kept buzzing, angry vibration against his pocket, against her hip. Z pushed him back. Answer it. No. Cassian, I don't care. The buzzing stopped. Started again immediately. Z extracted herself from his arms, straightened her coat with shaking hands. Someone really wants to talk to you. Cassian pulled out his phone, looked at the screen. Something in his expression changed, hardened. I have to take this, he said. Of course you do. He stepped away. Answered in Korean. His voice shifted. All business now. No trace of the man who'd been kissing her seconds ago. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. Tense. Clipped. When he hung up, he didn't look at her. I have to go, Cassian said. What happened? Family issue. What kind of issue? The kind I can't discuss. He grabbed his jacket from inside the office. Stay here. Eat the cake. Drink the wine. I'll be back in an hour. Cassian, please. He stopped at the elevator, looked back at her with an expression that could have been fear if fear had learned to wear expensive suits. Just wait for me. 1 hour. Then he was gone. Z stood alone in the hallway, surrounded by half-empty patisserie boxes and wine bottles, and the wreckage of whatever the hell just happened. She should leave, should run as far and fast as possible from this whole mess. Instead, she went back into his office and poured herself more wine. Cassian didn't come back in an hour, or 2, or 3. Z waited until midnight, alternating between fury and worry. She tried his phone, straight to voicemail. She tried his office line, nothing. She paced the length of his windows, watching the city empty into late-night silence. At 12:47, her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Miss Vale, this is Marcus Ree. My son has been detained by federal authorities. I suggest you leave his office immediately and forget everything you know about this family. Z read it 3 times. Detained. Federal authorities. Her stomach dropped. She grabbed her things and ran for the elevator. It descended 43 floors while her heart tried to climb out through her throat. The lobby was empty except for security. They watched her leave without comment. Outside, Chicago's February cold hit like a slap. Z stood on the sidewalk trying to breathe, trying to think. Cassian had been arrested. For what? His family's business? Something specific? Something she'd accidentally helped facilitate by planning this insane wedding? Her phone buzzed again. Email from Cassian's encrypted account. Sent 18 minutes ago. Z. If you're reading this, something went wrong. Don't trust my father. Don't trust anyone in my family. The final payment will hit your account tonight. $175,000. Take it and disappear. Forget you ever knew me. This was my mistake, not yours. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. CZ's hand shook so hard she could barely hold the phone. She checked her bank account. The money was already there. $175,000. The full payment. The complete contract fulfilled. She had everything she'd needed 6 months ago. Debt paid, business saved, future secured. All she had to do was walk away. She didn't walk away. Z spent the next 3 days trying to find information about what happened to Cassian. She called lawyers, searched news sites, drove past his building looking for some sign of what federal authorities wanted with him. Nothing. The Ree family had money and power and apparently enough connections to make arrests disappear from public record. On the 4th day, Marcus Ree called her directly. Ms. Vale, he said when she answered, we should talk. About what? About how much you actually know regarding my son's business activities. I don't know anything. Good. Let's keep it that way. His voice carried that same cold precision Cassian sometimes did. You received full payment for your services. Consider the contract completed. Move on with your life. Where is he? Z asked. That's not your concern. If he's in federal custody, he's not, Marcus interrupted. He's being handled internally. Family matter, none of which involves you. Internally. Z's grip tightened on her phone. What does that mean? It means my son made choices that have consequences. He'll face them appropriately. You can't just... Ms. Vale. Marcus's voice dropped to something that could have passed for kindness if it hadn't been wrapped in steel. You seem like a talented young woman who got caught up in something you didn't understand. I'm offering you a clean exit. Take it. Walk away. Forget about Cassian. Forget about this wedding. Forget about everything. And if I don't? Silence stretched across the line. Then you'll discover exactly why my family has maintained power in this city for 3 generations, Marcus said finally. Despite people like you occasionally interfering. He hung up. Z sat in her apartment staring at the phone, threats wrapped in politeness, power wearing the mask of civility. She should be terrified. She was terrified. But she was also furious. What? The 5th day after Cassian disappeared, Z received a package. No return address. No note. Just a small box sitting outside her apartment door. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten card in Cassian's precise handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm either dead or detained somewhere my father can control me. This drive contains everything you need to understand what actually happened. Watch it somewhere safe, delete it after. Get out of Chicago. Please. See, Z's hands shook, holding the card. She took the flash drive to a public library 30 minutes from her apartment. Used a computer that didn't connect to any account she owned. Plugged it in. One video file, dated 3 days ago. She clicked play. Cassian appeared on screen looking exhausted. He sat in what looked like his apartment, minimal furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows behind him showing the city at night. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, hair disheveled like he'd been running hands through it. "Z," he said to the camera, voice rough. "If you're watching this, I've run out of time to fix things. I need you to understand what I was actually trying to do." He took a breath. 6 months ago, my father arranged a marriage for me. Not suggested. Arranged. The bride was the daughter of a business associate connected to some of our family's less legitimate operations. The marriage would have solidified alliances that would make it impossible for me to ever extract myself from the parts of this family I've been trying to escape for years. On screen, Cassian poured himself a drink, drank it, continued. I refused. My father threatened to destroy my legitimate businesses, threatened to cut me off entirely, threatened everything except the one thing that would have actually worked, my freedom. He laughed bitterly. So I came up with a plan. A stupid, desperate, manipulative plan that would either save me or destroy everything. I would arrange my own marriage to someone outside the family's control, someone not connected to their business, someone they couldn't touch without creating problems they couldn't afford. His eyes met the camera directly. I chose you. Z's breath stopped. I saw you at that wedding, Cassian continued. Saw you creating something beautiful while your world collapsed. Saw you solving problems with grace and stubbornness. And I thought, here's someone strong enough to survive contact with my family. Someone smart enough to understand what she's getting into. Someone desperate enough to take the money, but principled enough not to become corrupted by it. He set his glass down. I know how this sounds. I know what I did was unforgivable. I used your desperation against you, built a lie around you, manipulated every interaction so you'd let me get close without running. His voice cracked slightly. But everything between us was real. Every conversation, every moment, every time I looked at you and saw someone honest in a world where honesty is a weapon people use against you. I fell in love with you, really in love, not because of the plan, despite it. On screen, Cassian stood, paced, came back. My father found out about the wedding 3 days ago. Someone leaked information. He's moving to stop it, either by marrying me off to his choice anyway, or by making sure I'm controlled in ways I can't escape. There's a strong possibility I won't be free after tonight. He moved closer to the camera. If you're watching this, I'm already gone. Take the money, leave Chicago, build your business somewhere my family can't touch you. Forget about me. Forget about this insane plan. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. I'm sorry I fell in love with you under circumstances that made it impossible for that love to mean anything real. His hand reached toward the screen, stopped. You deserved better, Cassian said quietly. You deserve someone who could be honest from the beginning. Someone who wasn't trying to use you as an escape route from his own family. Someone who... The video cut off. Z sat frozen in the library chair staring at the blank screen. Around her, people typed on computers and whispered about research papers, and lived normal lives where their failing businesses didn't lead to being manipulated by gorgeous criminals who fell in love while orchestrating elaborate marriage schemes. She should delete the video, should take the money and run like Cassian told her to, should forget about the beautiful broken man who'd lied to her and used her and somehow still made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. Her phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. The wedding is scheduled for this Saturday. Venue you selected. All details you planned. Only the bride has changed. Sorry. Marcus Ree. Z stared at the message, then she started laughing. Harsh, broken sounds that made other library patrons look at her with concern. Marcus thought he'd won, thought he could take the wedding Z designed and use it for his own purposes. Thought she'd just walk away and let it happen. He was wrong. Z grabbed her phone and typed a message to the only person she could think of who might be able to help. Her landlord's nephew. The one who'd gone to law school and specialized in contract law. The one she'd helped with his sister's wedding last year. Emergency. Need a lawyer who doesn't scare easy. Paying cash. Call me. The response came 12 minutes later. How much trouble are you in? Z looked at the blank computer screen where Cassian's face had been. Thought about his voice cracking when he said he'd fallen in love. Thought about his father threatening to make him disappear. A lot, she typed back. But not as much trouble as someone's about to be. I'll shout you. The venue looked exactly like Z had designed it. Exposed brick, steel beams, walls of windows overlooking Chicago's West Loop, white roses and garden roses and centerpiece arrangements, string lights hanging from the industrial ceiling like captured stars. The cello she'd specifically requested sat in the corner ready to play. Everything perfect. Everything hers. Just not for her. Z stood in the alley behind the venue, wearing black jeans and a leather jacket, watching delivery vans arrive with her cake, her flowers, her carefully selected details being used for someone else's forced marriage. Saturday afternoon, 6 hours until the ceremony. Her phone buzzed. Text from the lawyer. Got the contract. You're right. It's airtight. Only you have authority to modify or cancel event elements. But using that authority to sabotage a family event is professionally suicidal. Z typed back, good thing I'm already suicidal. Send the legal notices. She watched 3 men in suits arrive at the venue's back entrance. Security. Probably armed. Definitely not friendly. This was insane. She was about to start a war with one of Chicago's most powerful families using nothing but contract law and spite. Her phone buzzed again. Message from Cassian's encrypted email. Z, wherever you are, whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. My father will destroy you. Please, just take the money and disappear. Let me go. I'm not worth what he'll do to you if you interfere. Please. CZ read it twice. Then she walked toward the venue's front entrance where Marcus Ree's security would definitely see her coming. She hit send on the message she'd typed to Cassian's email. Too late. Already interfering. Hold on. Z. The wedding venue doors opened in front of her. Marcus Ree stood in the center of the space, surrounded by his beautiful stolen decorations, looking at her with eyes that calculated exactly how much damage he'd need to do. Ms. Vale, he said, you were told to stay away. You're using my designs, Z replied, without permission. That's breach of contract. I paid for those designs. You paid your son, who hired me, under specific contractual terms that give me exclusive authority over implementation. She pulled out her phone, showed him the legal notice her lawyer had filed an hour ago. As of 30 minutes ago, every vendor involved in this event has been notified that any cooperation with unauthorized parties violates their contracts with Vale Events. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. I make a lot of those. Z stepped further into the venue. Here's another one. This wedding doesn't happen unless Cassian is here. Free, unchained, able to make his own choices. My son made his choices. Now he faces consequences. No. Z moved closer, close enough to see Marcus Ree was shorter than his son, older than his confidence suggested, and absolutely certain he held every card. You're forcing consequences. There's a difference. Semantics. Law. Z pulled out the second document her lawyer had prepared. Illinois recognizes coerced marriage as void. If the ceremony happens under duress, I have documentation proving it. Photos, recordings, your own words threatening me to stay away. All admissible if anyone decides to investigate your family business. Marcus smiled without warmth. You think you can threaten me? I think I can make this wedding extremely complicated for you, which is exactly what you don't want, right? You want this quiet, simple, legitimacy through marriage. But if I go public with the truth, you'll destroy your career, Marcus interrupted. You'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure every client you approach hears about the unstable wedding planner who sabotaged events and violated contracts. Maybe. Z's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her pockets. But your business associates will hear about the Ree family forcing marriages. And federal investigators who are clearly already interested in your operations will have one more reason to look closely at everything you do. Silence stretched between them. Outside the windows, Chicago gleamed in afternoon light, beautiful and indifferent. What do you want? Marcus asked finally. Cassian, here, free, in the next hour. And if I deliver him, then the wedding happens. Exactly as planned, for exactly who it was designed for. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You're in love with him. That's none of your business. It's entirely my business. My son has a talent for making people fall in love with him, uses it like a weapon. His voice carried something that could have been pride or warning. You think you're special? You think whatever he told you was real? I think he's desperate enough to marry a stranger to escape you, Z said. which tells me everything I need to know about this family. Marcus moved closer. His presence carried weight that had nothing to do with physical size. I could make you disappear. You could try. Z pulled out her phone, showed him a third message. This one queued to send automatically if she didn't cancel it in the next 2 hours. But my lawyer has copies of everything. And if anything happens to me, it all goes to the FBI office investigating your family. Bluffing. Test me. They stared at each other across the space she'd designed to hold love and promises and hope. Now it just held two people playing extremely dangerous games. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Something shifted in his expression. 1 hour, he said. My son will be here. And Ms. Vale? Yes? After tonight, you're either family or you're an enemy. There's no third option. Choose carefully. He walked out. Z stood alone in her beautiful venue, surrounded by flowers and lights and the wreckage of whatever normal life she might have had, and realized exactly what she'd just done. She'd declared war on one of Chicago's most powerful families, using nothing but a wedding and a contract, and the terrifying truth that she'd fallen in love with someone who'd manipulated her into this exact position. Her phone buzzed. Message from Cassian. What did you do? Z typed back with shaking hands. Something probably stupid. Are you okay? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Physically, yes. Mentally, no. Z, you can't fight my father. Watch me. I'm serious. He'll destroy you. Then we'll be destroyed together, Z sent. Seems fitting. Long pause. Then, I don't deserve you. No, Z agreed. You really don't. See you in an hour. Try to look presentable. We have a wedding to crash. She put her phone away and looked around the venue one more time. In 60 minutes, Cassian would walk through those doors, either as a free man making his own choice, or as someone still trapped in his father's control. Either way, this was ending tonight, one way or another. Cassian arrived 47 minutes later. Z watched through the venue windows as a black car pulled up to the curb and 2 men in suits stepped out first. Security, scanning the street before opening the rear door. Then Cassian emerged looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. His white shirt was wrinkled, hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes that even distance couldn't hide. He moved like someone who'd forgotten how to carry his own weight properly. But he was here, alive, free enough to walk through the door alone when his security held back. Z met him in the entryway. They stood 3 feet apart, close enough to touch, neither of them moving. You look terrible, Z said. You look furious. I am furious. Good. Cassian's voice came out rough, raw. You should be. Behind him, the venue had transformed into something that looked ready for a ceremony. Florists had finished the arrangements. Caterers were setting up in the back. The cellist tuned her instrument in the corner, everything perfect and waiting. Your father thinks I'm bluffing, Z said. Are you? I have no idea. She pulled out her phone, showed him the queued messages, the legal documents, the recorded conversations with vendors. I have this, that's it. No actual evidence of coercion, no proof he's forcing you into anything, just a lot of contracts and threats and desperation. Cassian looked at the screen for a long moment, then at her face. You declared war on my family, he said quietly. You asked me to plan a wedding. I'm just making sure the right people get married. Zit! Don't. She cut him off. Don't tell me this was a mistake. Don't tell me to run. Don't apologize for dragging me into this. I'm already here. I already made my choice. What choice? You. The word came out harder than she intended. Angrier. I chose you, despite every red flag, despite the lies, despite the fact that you're clearly damaged and dangerous and incapable of being honest about anything without recording a dramatic video first. Something cracked in Cassian's expression. Not quite breaking, just fracturing enough to let real emotion through. I don't know how to do this, he said. Do what? Be chosen. Be wanted for reasons that have nothing to do with my last name or my money or what I can provide. His hands flexed at his sides like he wanted to reach for her but couldn't remember how. Everyone in my life wants something from me. Access, power, protection. You're the first person who just wanted me. I don't want you, Z corrected. I want to murder you most of the time, but I'm also apparently in love with you, which is the worst possible outcome of this entire disaster." Cassian laughed, a broken sound that could have been a sob if it had been less controlled. Worst possible outcome. Objectively terrible. Catastrophically bad decision-making. The absolute worst. Z moved closer, close enough to see his pulse jumping in his throat, close enough to smell exhaustion and stress coming off him in waves. "So what do we do about it?" "I don't know." "Neither do I." Her hand came up to his face, touched his jaw carefully, like he might shatter. "But we have about 6 hours to figure it out before your father's replacement bride shows up expecting to get married." Cassian's hand covered hers, held it against his face with desperate pressure. "There is no replacement bride. My father was bluffing. He wanted to scare you into leaving. The marriage he arranged was with you. It was always with you." Z's brain stuttered. "What?" "When he found out about my plan 6 days ago, he didn't try to stop it. He tried to take it over, control it, make sure the wedding happened on his terms instead of mine." Cassian's thumb moved across her knuckles. "He knows forcing me to marry someone I hate would just drive me further from the family. But tricking me into marrying someone I love while making sure she's under his influence, that keeps me trapped permanently." The words landed like punches. "He was never going to stop the wedding," Z said slowly. "No. He was just making sure I couldn't use it against him." "Yes. So when I threatened him with exposure and legal action, you gave him exactly what he wanted," Cassian finished. "Proof that you're willing to fight for me. Proof that you're invested enough to risk your career and safety. Proof that marrying us benefits him because now he has leverage over both of us." Ze stepped back. Her hand fell away from his face. "I walked right into it. We both did." "No." Anger detonated through her chest. "You've been playing games with your father your whole life. I'm just the idiot who thought she could win against people who've been doing this for generations. Don't." She turned away from him, stared at the venue she'd designed with such care. Every detail chosen specifically for this moment. Every flower and light and carefully selected element now revealed as pieces in someone else's strategy. "He's been planning this the whole time, since the beginning, since before you even approached me." Cassian didn't deny it. "How long has your father known about me?" Z asked without turning around. Silence stretched behind her. "Cassian, how long?" "Since the Morrison wedding," he said finally. "He had surveillance on me, saw me watching you, started investigating you before I even made contact. So when you sent that first email, he already knew who you were, what you needed, how desperate you'd become." Cassian's voice carried something that sounded like shame. "I thought I was being clever, thought I was orchestrating everything, but he was 3 steps ahead the entire time." Z laughed. The sound came out jagged and wrong. "So this whole thing, the money, the questions, the elaborate wedding planning, all of it was what? Your father's idea?" "No, the plan was mine, but he saw it happening and decided to let it play out because it served his purposes better than stopping it." "And you didn't think to mention this?" "I didn't know until 3 days ago, when he told me while his security held me in my apartment." Cassian moved closer. She felt him behind her like heat. "He explained very carefully how my brilliant plan to escape the family had actually just trapped me more completely than any arranged marriage could have. Because now I'm involved. Yes. And he can threaten me to control you. Yes. And if I walk away, he destroys your business, ruins your reputation, makes sure you never work in this city again." Cassian's hand touched her shoulder, light, careful. "But if you stay, if you marry me, he owns both of us. Forever." Z turned, looked up at the man who'd lied to her and used her and somehow still made her feel like she mattered more than anything. "We're completely fucked," she said, comprehensively. "There's no way out. None that I can see. So what do we do?" Cassian's jaw tightened. "We get married, we play his game, we survive, and we look for weaknesses while pretending to be controlled." "That's your plan? Pretend to lose while looking for an escape route that might not exist?" "Unless you have a better one." Z wanted to scream, wanted to destroy every perfect detail in this venue, wanted to go back 6 months and tell herself to let the business fail, instead of taking money from beautiful strangers with dangerous families. But she couldn't go back, She could only move forward into whatever trap had been built around her. "I need air," she said. Z walked past him toward the back exit. Cassian followed. They ended up in the alley behind the venue where delivery vans had emptied their cargo hours earlier. Chicago's March cold bit through her jacket. She welcomed it. Needed the shock of something real and uncomfortable. "Tell me about your father," Z said. "Everything. No more half-truths." Cassian leaned against the brick wall, lit a cigarette with shaking hands. First time she'd seen him smoke. "My father built the Re-Empire from nothing," he said. "Came to Chicago 40 years ago with money from sources he won't discuss and connections that made him untouchable. Started with real estate, expanded into private security, then consulting, then investments. Legal investments? Some." Cassian took a drag, exhaled smoke into cold air. "But the money came from other places. Drug distribution, money laundering, information brokering. He built a network that touches every part of this city's underworld while maintaining a completely legitimate public face. And you grew up in that. I grew up being trained to inherit it. Private schools, business degree, law school, all of it designed to make me the perfect frontman for operations that required respectability." His voice went flat, empty. "My father's plan was always to retire and hand everything to me, keep the empire running through generations." "But you didn't want it." "I wanted to be legitimate. Actually legitimate, not just pretending." Cassian crushed the cigarette under his shoe. 5 years ago, I started extracting myself, sold off the illegal assets I controlled, cut ties with the dangerous contacts, built separate businesses that had nothing to do with his operations." "And he let you?" "He thought it was a phase, rebellion, something I'd grow out of once I understood how power actually works." Cassian looked at her. "But I didn't grow out of it. I got more determined. Started cooperating with federal investigators who've been building cases against various family associates." Z's stomach dropped. "You're an informant?" "Not officially, but I've provided information, testified under seal, helped dismantle parts of the network in exchange for immunity for my legitimate businesses." "Does your father know?" "He suspects. Can't prove it. But the arrests over the last 2 years, the investigations, he knows someone inside the family is cooperating." Cassian's hands flexed. "Which makes me either an asset he needs to control or a threat he needs to eliminate. And marrying me controls you, completely, because now he can threaten you to make me do anything he wants. Stop cooperating with investigators, return to the family business, protect the empire instead of helping destroy it." His voice cracked. "I thought I was saving myself. Instead, I handed him the perfect weapon." Z processed this standing in a freezing alley behind a venue designed for love, while learning she'd been turned into leverage against a federal informant trying to escape his criminal family. "This is so much worse than I thought," she said. "Yes, we can't get married. If we don't, he destroys you, and probably kills me. If we do, we're trapped forever." "Yes. Those are terrible options. Welcome to my life." Z paced the length of the alley, trying to think, trying to find the angle that made any of this survivable. "The investigators," she said. "Can they help?" "Not without evidence. And anything I provide now looks like I'm trying to leverage them against my father in a personal dispute." Cassian pushed off the wall. "The cases they're building take years. They need documentation, testimony from multiple sources, concrete proof that survives legal challenges." "How long?" 18 months, maybe 2 years, if everything goes perfectly." "We don't have 18 months. "No." Z stopped pacing. "What happens if we just run? Take the money and disappear?" "He finds us. My father has resources you can't imagine. Connections across multiple countries. People who owe him favors." Cassian moved closer. "And when he finds us, he makes an example. Not just to punish us. To show everyone else what happens when you try to leave. So we're trapped. Completely. And getting married tonight makes it worse." "Yes. But not getting married also makes it worse." "Also, yes," Z laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off brick walls. "This is the worst proposal I've ever received. It's not a proposal. It's a hostage situation. Romance is dead." Murdered by my father and buried in legal complications. Cassian caught her hand, held it carefully. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I dragged you into this. You deserved better than being weaponized against someone trying to escape his family. Stop apologizing. I can't, because this is my fault. All of it, from the beginning. Z looked down at their joined hands. His fingers were cold, shaking slightly. The perfect control he usually maintained had cracked completely, leaving someone terrified and exhausted and utterly out of moves. I need to tell you something, Z said, and you're not going to like it. I already don't like anything about this situation. 2 days ago, when I got your video, I made copies, sent them to 3 different people with instructions to release everything if something happened to me. She met his eyes. Your father's threats, your confession about the family business, everything. Cassian went very still. To who? A journalist who specializes in organized crime, a lawyer who handles whistleblower cases, and the FBI field office that's investigating your family. Z! I wasn't bluffing when I told your father I had insurance. I actually did it, set up a dead man's switch before I confronted him. Her voice stayed steady despite her heart trying to break through her ribs. So if he kills us, everything goes public. Your cooperation with investigators, his threats, the whole story. Silence filled the alley. Then Cassian said quietly, You just made yourself untouchable. Or I painted a target on my back that's even bigger. No, my father can't touch you now without triggering exactly the kind of exposure he spent decades avoiding. Cassian's hands came up to frame her face. You brilliant, terrifying, completely insane woman. I had a lot of time to think while you were missing. You built a nuclear option. I built the only leverage that matters to someone like your father. Z's hands covered his. He can threaten my business, can ruin my reputation, but he can't kill me. And he can't make me disappear, because the second he does, everything explodes. Which means we have actual power, Z finished. Not much, but some. Enough to negotiate. Cassian's expression shifted. Something that could have been hope if hope hadn't been beaten down so many times. What kind of negotiation, he asked. The kind where we get married on our terms, not his. Z pulled back enough to see his face clearly. We go through with the wedding tonight. Make it look like he won, but we include conditions. Things he has to agree to if he wants us both under his control. Like what? Like you continuing to live your own life. Running your legitimate businesses without interference. No forced involvement in illegal operations. Her voice got harder. And if he ever threatens me again, if he ever tries to use me as leverage, the dead man's switch activates automatically. He'll never agree to that. He will if the alternative is watching his empire get destroyed by federal investigators using evidence his own son provided. Z's jaw set. You said he needs you controlled but alive, needs you looking legitimate for the next generation. Well, I'm the price of that legitimacy, and my price is freedom. Cassian stared at her for a long moment. Then he started laughing, real laughter, the kind that came from exhaustion and relief and absolute disbelief. You're going to try to negotiate with my father, he said. We're going to negotiate with your father. At our own wedding. It's the only leverage point we have. He wants this marriage to happen, wants it to look legitimate and willing. We use that. This is insane. This entire situation is insane, Z countered. At least my version lets us survive it with some dignity intact. Cassian pulled her against him, held her so tight she could barely breathe. His face pressed into her hair and she felt him shaking, whether from fear or relief or exhaustion, she couldn't tell. If this doesn't work, he started, then we're exactly as fucked as we already are, Z interrupted. Nothing changes. But if it does work, we buy ourselves time, space, enough freedom to figure out how to actually escape. How do you stay this brave? I'm not brave. I'm furious. She pulled back to look at him. Your father thinks he can control people through fear and leverage, but he made a mistake with me. What mistake? He assumed I had something to lose. Z's voice went cold. My business was already dying. My reputation was already destroyed by debt. I had nothing except desperation before you walked into my life. And now? Now I have you, which means I finally have something worth fighting for. Cassian kissed her. Desperate and careful, and full of things neither of them knew how to say aloud. When they broke apart, Z could see the venue through the open door. The flowers, the lights, the perfect details waiting for a ceremony that would either save them or trap them permanently. "We should go inside," she said. "Your father's going to arrive soon, expecting us to cooperate like good little prisoners." "What are you going to tell him?" "The truth." Z straightened her jacket. "That we're getting married, tonight, exactly as planned, but with new terms. And if he doesn't like it, he can watch his empire burn from the inside out." They walked back into the venue together. The space looked like something from a dream, warm lights against industrial edges, flowers everywhere. The cello playing soft Baroque pieces in the corner. Perfect. Beautiful. Ready. Marcus Ree stood in the center of it all, wearing an expensive suit and an expression that suggested he'd already won. "You came back," he said when he saw them. "We did," Z confirmed. "Good. The officiant will arrive in an hour. I've arranged for witnesses. Small ceremony. Quiet. Exactly what this situation requires." "About that," Z said, "we need to discuss terms." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Terms. Conditions for our cooperation. Things you agree to if you want this marriage to happen voluntarily instead of under obvious duress." She pulled out her phone, showed him a document her lawyer had drafted. "Everything written, legally binding, or we walk." "You're not in a position to make demands." "Actually, I am." Z's voice stayed level. "Because 2 days ago I sent copies of your son's recorded confession, including details about your business operations and his cooperation with federal investigators, to multiple people with instructions to release everything if anything happens to either of us." Marcus went very still. "You're bluffing. Test me. Kill us. Make us disappear. See what happens." She moved closer. "Or you can agree to reasonable terms that give you what you want. A legitimate marriage that controls your son, while giving us enough freedom to survive it." "What terms?" Marcus asked quietly. Z outlined them. Cassian's continued autonomy over his legitimate businesses, no forced involvement in illegal operations, no threats against Z's safety or career, complete freedom to live their married life without interference as long as Cassian stopped actively cooperating with investigators. "That's the deal," Z finished. "We get married tonight. We play the role of happy couple. We make you look legitimate and powerful and in control. But you back off. Give us space. Let us breathe." Marcus studied her face for a long moment. "You think you're clever." "I think I'm desperate enough to blow everything up rather than become your hostage." "My son chose well." Something that could have been approval flickered across Marcus's expression. "You have his stubbornness, his willingness to gamble everything on a single move." "Is that a yes?" "It's an acknowledgement that you've successfully created a stalemate." Marcus pulled out his own phone, made a call in Korean, spoke for 90 seconds, hung up. "My lawyers will review your terms. If they're acceptable, we have an agreement. And if they're not, then we'll have a very interesting evening." Marcus moved toward the door, stopped, looked back. "One more thing, Ms. Vale." "Yes?" "This dead man's switch of yours, the insurance policy. It only works as long as you're valuable to those investigators. The moment the federal cases close, whether through conviction or dismissal, your leverage evaporates." "I'm aware." "Which gives you perhaps 18 months, 2 years at most. After that, you're just another person who knows too much about my family." His voice dropped. "I hope you have a plan for when that day comes." He walked out. He stood in the center of the venue, feeling her victory curdle into something that tasted like ash. "He's right," Cassian said quietly behind her. "The dead man's switch only works temporarily." "I know. Which means we have less than 2 years to either escape completely or become so entangled in his world that escape becomes impossible." "I know that too. So what do we do?" Z turned to face him, the man she'd fallen in love with while he manipulated her into becoming a weapon against his own father. The beautiful, damaged stranger who'd offered her money and secrets and a way out of drowning. "We get married," she said. "We play the game, and we use the next 18 months to build an escape route he can't see coming. And if we can't, then at least we'll be trapped together." Cassian pulled her close. His heart beat against her cheek fast and unsteady. Around them, the venue glowed with warm light and careful beauty. a perfect illusion hiding the cold reality underneath. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I know." Z's arms wrapped around him. "I love you too," which is probably the most catastrophic thing either of us has ever felt. Definitely catastrophic. Professionally inadvisable. Emotionally devastating. "The worst possible outcome," Z whispered. "The absolute worst." They held each other in the middle of the trap they'd both helped build, knowing the ceremony would happen in less than an hour, knowing they'd exchange vows that would either save them or destroy them, knowing there was no good ending waiting at the end of this story. Only survival. Or something close to it. And maybe, if they were very lucky and very smart and very ruthless, a chance to build something real from the wreckage of all these beautiful lies. The officiant arrived at 7:30 looking uncomfortable and expensive. An older woman in judicial robes who'd clearly been paid extremely well to ask no questions about why this ceremony felt more like a hostage negotiation than a wedding. Z watched her enter from the back room where she'd been pacing for the last 20 minutes, trying to remember how to breathe normally. Her hands shook. She'd changed into the dress Cassian had sent her 3 days ago, simple white silk that fit perfectly because of course he'd known her exact measurements. Even that felt like surveillance disguised as romance. A knock on the door. "It's me," Cassian's voice came through the wood. "You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony. I think we're past worrying about tradition." Z opened the door. Cassian stood in a black suit that looked like it cost more than her first car. His hair was combed back, tie perfectly straight, but his eyes carried the same exhaustion and fear she felt clawing through her own chest. "My father's lawyers reviewed the terms," he said. "They're preparing the agreement now." "Will he sign?" "He doesn't have a choice. Not if he wants this to look voluntary." Cassian's jaw tightened. "But he's bringing witnesses, people connected to his business operations. This ceremony isn't just about controlling us. It's about making a statement to everyone who matters in his world." "What kind of statement?" "That the Ree family is legitimate now, respectable, that I'm falling in line exactly as planned." His hand came up to her face, touched her cheek carefully. "We're going to be performing for an audience that includes some very dangerous people. Then we better put on a good show. Are you sure about this?" Z caught his hand, held it against her face. "Ask me again after we survive tonight." They walked into the venue together 30 minutes later while the cello played something that sounded like mourning disguised as celebration. 20 people sat in chairs arranged in neat rows, all of them strangers to Z. All of them watching with expressions that calculated value and vulnerability in the same breath. Marcus Ree stood at the front beside the officiant, looking like victory had always been inevitable. The ceremony began. Z barely heard the words. She stood beside Cassian, holding his hand so tight her fingers went numb while the officiant read through standard vows that meant nothing and everything simultaneously. Around them, the venue glowed with the beauty Z had designed, flowers and lights, and perfect details that now felt like set dressing for a tragedy. "Do you, Cassian Ree, take this woman?" "I do," Cassian interrupted. His voice carried across the space with absolute certainty. No hesitation. No doubt. The officiant blinked, recovered, turned to Z. "And do you, Zephrine Vale?" "I do," Zia said before she could finish. Silence stretched through the venue. Then Marcus started clapping, slow, measured. The sound echoed off exposed brick while his guests joined in with enthusiasm that felt rehearsed. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said quietly. Cassian pulled Z close and kissed her like they were alone, instead of performing for 20 witnesses who'd come to watch a trap spring shut. His hand tangled in her hair, her fingers dug into his shoulders. The kiss tasted like desperation and defiance and promises neither of them knew if they could keep. When they broke apart, Z saw Marcus approaching with a leather folder. "Congratulations," he said with a smile that never reached his eyes. "You're officially family now." He opened the folder. Inside were the terms Z had demanded, typed on legal letterhead, notarized, ready for signatures. She scanned the document quickly. Everything she'd asked for was there: Cassian's autonomy, her protection, freedom within the marriage. And at the bottom, one additional clause she hadn't written. All terms void if either party violates confidentiality regarding Ree family business operations, or cooperates with law enforcement investigations after the date of this agreement. Z's stomach dropped. That wasn't in our negotiation, she said. It's a reasonable addition, Marcus replied. You get your freedom. We get insurance that you won't use it against us. This changes everything. This changes nothing, unless you were planning to continue assisting federal investigators. Marcus's gaze shifted to Cassian. Were you planning to do that, son? Cassian's face went carefully blank. No. Then sign. Z looked at the clause again. Read it 3 times, trying to find the loophole. There wasn't one. If Cassian continued cooperating with the federal investigation after tonight, the entire agreement became void. Marcus could destroy them both. The dead man's switch wouldn't matter because Zay would have technically violated the contract first. This makes the marriage worthless as protection, she said quietly. No, Marcus corrected. This makes the marriage worth exactly what it always was. A leash. You wanted terms. I'm giving them to you. But I'm also making sure those terms include consequences for betrayal. We need time to review this with a lawyer. You have 30 seconds. Then the agreement expires and we proceed without terms at all. Marcus checked his watch. 25 seconds. Z's heart hammered. She looked at Cassian. He stared at the document like it held execution orders. If we don't sign, she started. We have nothing, Cassian finished. No protection, no leverage, just his goodwill, which doesn't exist. If we do sign, I stop cooperating with investigators. The federal cases lose their inside source, and we hope they have enough evidence already to proceed without me. 20 seconds, Marcus said. Do they? Z asked. Do the investigators have enough? I don't know. Cassian's voice came out strained, raw. Maybe. If the cases are as strong as they claimed, but without me actively providing information, 15 seconds. Z grabbed the pen. Her hand shook so hard the signature came out jagged, barely legible. She shoved the document at Cassian. Sign it. Sign it, or we have nothing. At least this way we buy time. Cassian took the pen, hesitated with it hovering over the signature line. Around them, Marcus's guests watched like they were witnessing something far more interesting than a wedding. 10 seconds, Marcus said. Cassian signed. The pen scratched across expensive paper, sealing them both into an agreement that might save them, or destroy them, or somehow manage to do both simultaneously. Marcus took the folder back, closed it with a snap that sounded like a cell door locking. Excellent, he said. Now let's celebrate. The reception began immediately, catering staff appearing with champagne and appetizers while a jazz quartet set up in the corner. Marcus's guests transformed from silent witnesses into a party crowd, talking and laughing like they hadn't just watched 2 people sign away their futures. Ze stood beside Cassian, accepting congratulations from strangers whose names she'd never remember. Her face hurt from forcing smiles. Her hand ached from shaking hands with people who looked at her like she was a newly acquired asset. You did well, a woman in her 50s said, gripping Z's hand with manicured nails. Marcus's son needed someone strong, someone who wouldn't break under pressure. Thank you, Zia managed. Of course, strength only matters if you're smart enough to recognize when you're beaten. The woman's smile sharpened. I hope you're that smart. She walked away before Z could respond. Cassian appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. That was Helen Park. She runs money laundering operations through real estate fronts across 6 states. Your father invited money launderers to our wedding. He invited business associates. That they happen to be criminals is incidental. Cassian drank his champagne in 3 swallows. This entire guest list is a power demonstration. Every person here represents a piece of his empire, and we just became the newest pieces on display. I need air. We can't leave yet. Not until we've made the rounds. Proven we're cooperative and controlled. I'm going to throw up. Do it quietly. Cassian set both glasses down and caught her hand. Come on. Let me introduce you to the people who now own pieces of our future. The next hour became a blur of forced conversations with dangerous people pretending to be legitimate businessmen. A man who controlled dock workers' unions and used them to move contraband. A woman who owned a chain of check cashing stores that existed solely to facilitate illegal transactions. A lawyer who specialized in making evidence disappear. All of them congratulated Z on her marriage. All of them looked at her like they were calculating her breaking point. By 9 o'clock, Z's face ached from smiling and her hand hurt from gripping champagne glasses she barely drank. She excused herself to the bathroom and locked the door behind her with shaking hands. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger. White dress, perfect makeup, hair styled in elegant waves, everything beautiful and false and carefully constructed to hide the screaming panic underneath. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. "We need to talk, outside, back alley, 5 minutes. Come alone." Agent Carson, FBI. Z's heart stopped. She stared at the message, trying to process. FBI. Here. Now. During her wedding reception. This was either salvation or a trap. She texted back, "How do I know you're really FBI?" The response came immediately. "Because Cassian Rhee has been cooperating with our investigation for 18 months under the codename Architect. He provided testimony regarding his father's money laundering operations. And you just signed a contract promising he'd stop. We need to talk about that." Z's hand shook so hard she nearly dropped the phone. The investigation knew about tonight, knew about the contract, which meant they'd been watching, listening, documenting everything. She typed, 5 minutes. Z fixed her makeup with numb fingers, checked that the hallway was empty, slipped out the back exit into the alley where she'd stood with Cassian hours earlier planning their survival. A woman in her 40s waited in the shadows, wearing a dark suit and an expression that suggested she'd seen worse things than forced marriages. "Agent Carson," she said, showing credentials. "FBI Organized Crime Division. We need to talk about your new husband." "He signed the contract," Z said. "He agreed to stop cooperating. That's it. We're done." "Except you're not." Carson moved closer. "Because that contract your father-in-law drafted? It's worthless. Cassian can't legally agree to stop cooperating with an ongoing federal investigation. Any contract requiring him to do so is void." "What?" "You can't sign away cooperation with law enforcement. Doesn't work that way. Which means the contract you both just signed in front of 20 witnesses has no legal standing." Carson pulled out a folder. "Which also means you're not actually protected by its terms." Z's stomach dropped. "Marcus doesn't know that." "Marcus absolutely knows that. He's a smart man with expensive lawyers. He knows the contract is worthless." Carson's voice softened slightly. "But he also knows you don't know that, which means he just tricked you both into thinking you have protection when you actually have nothing." "Then why are you telling me this?" "Because we need Cassian to keep cooperating, and right now he thinks he's legally bound not to." Carson opened the folder showing photos of Marcus with various associates. "We're 48 hours from executing warrants across 15 locations connected to Rhee family operations. Money laundering, drug distribution, human trafficking. We have 18 months of evidence, but we need Cassian's testimony to tie it directly to Marcus. He can't testify, not without violating the contract that's legally void. But if Marcus thinks it's valid, if he thinks Cassian violated it," Z's brain raced through implications. "He'll kill us both. Which is why we're offering protection. Witness protection, new identities, complete extraction." Carson's eyes met hers. "We execute the warrants in 48 hours, Cassian testifies. Marcus and his entire operation go down, and you both disappear into new lives somewhere his reach can't touch. Witness protection." Z laughed harshly. "You want us to give up everything, our names, our lives, everything. I want you to survive. Because if you stay in Chicago after Marcus figures out his contract is worthless, and he will figure it out, you're both dead." Carson pulled out a burner phone. "This is your lifeline. When you're ready to accept extraction, you call. We'll have a team at your location in under 5 minutes. And if we don't call, then I'll see you both at Marcus Rhee's trial, assuming you live that long." Carson walked away, leaving Z alone in the alley holding a burner phone and the knowledge that she'd just married into a trap that was even worse than she'd thought. She stood there in her wedding dress, breathing cold air and trying to think, trying to find the angle that let them survive without destroying everything. There wasn't one. Either they ran, gave up their names and lives and everything they'd built, or they stayed and waited for Marcus to figure out the contract was worthless and kill them both. Her phone buzzed. The regular one, not the burner. Text from Cassian. "Where are you? People are asking." Z typed back, Outside, needed air, be right there. She shoved the burner phone in her bra and walked back inside. The reception continued like nothing had changed. Jazz played. People danced. Marcus held court in the center of the room, surrounded by associates who laughed at his jokes and looked at him with calculated fear disguised as respect. Z found Cassian near the windows, watching the party with empty eyes. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Not here. It can't wait." The FBI was outside. "They want you to keep testifying. They're executing warrants in 48 hours, and the contract your father made us sign is legally worthless." Cassian went very still. "What?" "You can't legally agree to stop cooperating with law enforcement. The contract is void, which means we're not protected by its terms, which means your father just tricked us both into thinking we had leverage when we actually have nothing. He knows that. Of course he knows that. He's been playing us the entire time." Z's voice came out harsh, strained. "The FBI is offering witness protection, new identities, complete extraction. We have 48 hours to decide. Witness protection means giving up everything. Staying means dying when your father figures out we know the truth about the contract." "He might not." "Cassian," Z grabbed his arm. "He already knows. This whole thing was about making sure we felt safe enough to relax our guard. Making us think we won." And then a crash interrupted her. They both turned toward the sound. Marcus stood in the center of the room holding a champagne glass that had shattered on the marble floor. His face had gone white, not with rage, with fear. Someone had handed him a phone. He was reading something on the screen with an expression that suggested the world was ending. Then his eyes found Cassian across the room. "Everyone out," Marcus said quietly. Nobody moved. "Now!" His voice exploded through the space. "Everyone except family. Get out." The guests evacuated in under 90 seconds. Expensive suits and dresses flooding toward exits while the jazz quartet scrambled to pack instruments. Within 3 minutes, the venue was empty except for Marcus, Cassian, Z, and 2 security guards blocking the doors. "When were you going to tell me?" Marcus asked. His voice came out dead, flat, more frightening than rage would have been. "Tell you what," Cassian replied, "that the FBI is executing warrants tomorrow morning, that they've been building cases against every major operation for 18 months, that my own son has been cooperating the entire time." Marcus moved closer. "Or were you planning to just let me find out when federal agents kicked down my door?" "How did you—" Cassian started. "I have people inside the FBI. Did you think I wouldn't? Did you think I'd just trust that you'd stopped cooperating because of a worthless contract?" Marcus's composure cracked. "Tomorrow morning. They're hitting 15 locations simultaneously. They have evidence, testimony, documentation, everything they need to destroy 3 generations of work." "Good," Cassian said quietly. Marcus hit him. The punch landed solid across Cassian's jaw, snapping his head sideways. Z screamed. Cassian stumbled but didn't fall. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. "You ungrateful!" Marcus's hands shook. "I built this empire for you. Everything I did was so you could inherit power, real power, not some legitimate business fantasy that collapses the moment real players get involved." "I didn't want your empire," Cassian said through bloody teeth. "I wanted a life that didn't involve looking over my shoulder waiting for federal raids or assassinations or betrayals from business partners. You wanted weakness, safety, things that don't exist in the real world. Then maybe I don't want to live in your real world." Marcus pulled a gun. The movement was smooth, practiced. He held it with the casual comfort of someone who'd carried weapons for decades. "Don't," Z said. Her voice came out strangled. "Don't do this." "This doesn't concern you," Marcus replied without looking at her. "She's my wife," Cassian said. "Everything concerns her now." "Your wife," Marcus laughed bitterly. "The woman you married as part of some desperate escape plan. You think that means anything? You think she's actually going to stand by you when federal agents offer her immunity for testifying against me?" "I'm standing right here," Z said. "For now." Marcus finally looked at her. "But tomorrow morning, when the FBI raids begin and your new husband gets arrested as a cooperating witness, you'll be the first person they offer a deal to. And you'll take it, Because you're smart enough to recognize when a situation is lost. Maybe. Z's hands clenched at her sides. Or maybe I'll tell them exactly what you did tonight. Threatening us with guns at our wedding, forcing us into fraudulent contracts, making us accessories to operations we wanted no part of. Bold words for someone who cashed $500,000 of dirty money. Money I earned planning a wedding that turned out to be a trap. Money you took knowing it came from questionable sources. Marcus's smile was cold. You're just as compromised as my son now. The moment you signed that contract, worthless or not, you became complicit in family business. I signed under duress. Prove it. Z's heart hammered. He was right. She'd taken the money, signed the contract, married into the family. Any lawyer could argue she'd knowingly participated in operations connected to organized crime, which meant the FBI's offer of protection might not even extend to her. What do you want? Cassian asked. Blood still dripped from his mouth. You want me to run? Disappear? Make it look like I fled before the raids? I want you to do what you should have done from the beginning. Marcus's finger moved to the trigger. I want you to die protecting the family instead of destroying it. The gun came up. Z moved without thinking. She threw herself at Marcus, grabbing for the weapon with hands that shook and desperation that made her stupid. The gun went off, deafening crack that echoed through the empty venue. Something hot grazed her arm. Pain exploded across her skin. Then Cassian was there, slamming into his father with enough force to send them both crashing into chairs. The gun skittered across marble floor. Z scrambled after it, blood streaming down her arm, fingers reaching. One of the security guards got there first. He picked up the gun with professional calm and pointed it at Z. Back up, he said. Z backed up. Her arm screamed. Blood soaked through white silk, turning her wedding dress red. Cassian and Marcus fought like animals, punching, grappling, crashing through furniture. Years of resentment exploding into violence. Cassian landed a punch that snapped Marcus's head back. Marcus responded with a knee to Cassian's ribs that doubled him over. Stop, the guard said. The gun swung between Z and the fighting men like he couldn't decide who posed more threat. They didn't stop. Marcus grabbed a champagne bottle off a fallen table and smashed it across Cassian's shoulders. Glass exploded. Cassian hit the ground. Marcus stood over him, breathing hard, holding the broken bottle like a weapon. I should have done this years ago, he said. When you first started questioning family business, when you first suggested going legitimate, the broken glass came up. I thought you'd grow out of it, thought you'd learn, but you're too weak, too soft, too much like your mother. He raised the bottle. Z grabbed a centerpiece vase off the nearest table and threw it. The vase hit Marcus in the head with a wet crack. He stumbled. The bottle fell from his hand. Blood poured down his face from a gash across his temple. The guard's gun swung to Z. Don't move. She didn't move. Marcus touched his bleeding head, looked at his red fingers, then at Z standing in her ruined wedding dress, with blood streaming down her arm and fury burning in her eyes. You just assaulted me, he said quietly. You were about to murder your son. I was about to solve a problem. Marcus straightened despite the blood. Now you're both problems. The front door exploded inward. Federal agents poured through wearing tactical gear and carrying weapons that made Marcus's guards look underprepared. Within seconds, the venue filled with bodies and shouted commands, and the surreal image of Z's perfect wedding venue transformed into a raid scene. FBI! Hands where we can see them! Marcus's guards dropped their weapons immediately. Smart men who knew when a situation was lost. Marcus just stood there bleeding and calm while agents surrounded him. Marcus Ree, you're under arrest, Agent Carson said, emerging from the tactical team. She rattled off charges: money laundering, conspiracy, attempted murder, while another agent cuffed him. 48 hours, Marcus said, looking at Cassian. You couldn't even give me 48 hours before triggering early raids. I didn't, Cassian started. We've been watching this location all night, Carson interrupted, waiting to see if you'd actually try to kill your son. When we heard the gunshot, we moved in early. She nodded to two agents. Get him out of here. They dragged Marcus toward the door. He looked back once at Cassian and Z standing together, bloody and exhausted in the ruins of their wedding reception. This isn't over, he said. Then he was gone. Z's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the marble floor, blood pooling beneath her arm, and started laughing. Hysterical sounds that might have been sobs if they'd been less broken. Cassian dropped beside her, pulled her against his chest. They sat together on the floor of their wedding venue, surrounded by overturned chairs and broken glass, and federal agents processing a crime scene while their marriage was less than 3 hours old. "We survived," Cassian said into her hair. "We're covered in blood at our own wedding. Details. Your father tried to kill you. He's done worse. The FBI raided our reception. Best wedding ever." Z pushed back to look at his face. Split lip, swelling jaw, blood matting his hair. He looked like he'd been through a war. "We can't stay here," she said. "I know. They're going to want testimony. Evidence. They're going to put us both in protective custody while the cases proceed." "I know that too, which means witness protection. New identities, new lives." Zephyrin Vale and Cassian Rhee die tonight. His voice carried something that could have been relief if it hadn't been wrapped in grief. And someone new gets to live. Z looked around the venue one last time, the flowers she'd chosen, the lights she'd designed, the perfect details that represented the last fragments of the life she'd built before everything exploded. "I never even got to eat my own wedding cake," she said. Cassian started laughing, real laughter that turned into a cough that made him wince and clutch his ribs. Agent Carson appeared above them. "We need to get you both to a hospital, then a secure location. The Rhee family has associates who will be looking for revenge." "How long?" Z asked. "How long what?" "How long until we can stop running?" Carson's expression softened slightly. "Years? Maybe never. Men like Marcus Rhee have long memories and longer reach." She offered a hand to help Z up. "But at least you'll be alive to run." Z took the hand, let herself be pulled upright. Cassian stood beside her, moving like everything hurt. Together they walked out of their wedding venue for the last time. Outside, Chicago's night wrapped around them cold and indifferent. Police lights strobed across building faces. Media vans were already arriving, news crews who'd gotten word about a major FBI raid. This would be everywhere by morning. Their faces, their names, the story of a wedding that ended in federal arrests and attempted murder. Z looked at Cassian standing beside her in his destroyed suit with blood on his face and exhaustion in his eyes. "Hi," she said. "I'm your wife." "Hi," he replied. "I am your husband. This is terrible. Catastrophically bad. The worst possible outcome. Absolutely the worst." They were loaded into separate ambulances, protocol, the agent said, until they could verify neither of them posed security risks to the other. Z sat in the back of the ambulance while a paramedic cleaned the bullet graze on her arm and wrapped it in clean bandages. Through the rear window, she could see Cassian in another ambulance receiving similar treatment. Their eyes met across the distance. He mouthed something that looked like, "I love you." She mouthed back, "I know." Then the doors closed and the ambulance pulled away, carrying her toward hospitals and safe houses, and a future that looked nothing like what she'd planned 6 months ago when she'd accepted money from a beautiful stranger. The last thing she saw through the window was her wedding venue glowing with lights she'd chosen, hosting a crime scene instead of a celebration, beautiful and destroyed in exactly equal measure. The safe house sat 40 minutes outside Chicago in a suburb that looked like every other suburb, vinyl-sided houses with 2-car garages and lawns that someone else maintained. The kind of place where nobody looked twice at strangers because everyone was too busy pretending their own lives were normal. She stood at the bedroom window watching dawn break over identical rooftops, while her bandaged arm throbbed in rhythm with her pulse. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight. The hospital, the debriefing, the endless questions from federal agents who wanted every detail about Marcus Rhee and his operations and the wedding that had ended in gunfire. Cassian was in another room. Protocol, they said, until investigators could verify their stories matched, and neither of them posed security risks, like they were suspects instead of victims. Her phone, the burner agent Carson had given her, sat on the nightstand beside a bottle of painkillers she hadn't opened. Outside the door, 2 U.S. Marshals rotated shifts every 8 hours, protecting them from retaliation that might come from Marcus's associates. If it came. When it came. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Ms. Vale?" A female marshal she didn't recognize. Agent Carson is here. Conference room downstairs. Z followed her down to a dining room that had been converted into a command center. Laptops, encrypted phones, maps of Chicago with locations marked in red. Carson sat at the head of the table, looking like she'd slept even less than Z had. Sit, Carson said. Z sat. Where's Cassian? Being debriefed separately. Standard procedure. Carson pulled out a folder thick with documents. We executed warrants this morning across 15 locations connected to Ree family operations. Seized financial records, arrested 12 associates, recovered evidence linking Marcus Ree to money laundering operations dating back 20 years. Good. It's not good. It's a start. Carson opened the folder showing photos of men in handcuffs being led from various buildings. But here's the problem. Marcus isn't talking. Neither are his lawyers. And without testimony from someone inside the organization, someone who can verify what these documents actually mean, we have circumstantial evidence that expensive lawyers can challenge in court. You have Cassian's testimony. We have 18 months of recorded statements and documentation he provided, but defense attorneys will argue he had personal motivations to lie about his father. Family conflict, financial disputes, a son trying to destroy his father's legacy out of spite. Carson's finger tapped one of the photos. We need corroboration. Someone else who can verify the operations from inside. I don't know anything about his operations. You know about the wedding, the contract, the threats, the attempted murder. Carson pulled out another document, the marriage contract Z and Cassian had signed. This alone proves Marcus was forcing his son into situations under duress. Shows a pattern of control and coercion. Combined with Cassian's testimony about illegal operations, it builds a narrative that juries understand. You want me to testify? I want you to help us make sure Marcus Ree spends the rest of his life in federal prison instead of walking free because his lawyers created reasonable doubt. Z looked at the photos spread across the table. Marcus in handcuffs. His associates being processed. Buildings she'd never seen connected to operations she'd never understood. What happens if I say no? She asked. She asked him. Then you get new identities and disappear into witness protection like we discussed. You and Cassian. New names, new lives. Somewhere his father's reach can't touch you. Carson's voice softened slightly. But Marcus walks. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But eventually his lawyers find holes in our case and he cuts a deal or beats the charges entirely. And then he comes looking for the son who betrayed him. Even in witness protection? Men like Marcus have resources you can't imagine, connections that extend into federal systems, money that buys information from people who shouldn't be selling it. Carson leaned forward. Witness protection works, but it's not perfect. And the longer Marcus stays free and angry, the more likely he finds you. So testifying keeps us safer. Testifying puts him away permanently, removes the threat entirely. Carson closed the folder. But I won't lie to you. Testifying means your face on the news, your name in court documents, everyone knowing you were part of bringing down a major organized crime operation. That brings different risks. Like what? Like becoming a target for every associate Marcus has who wants revenge or to prove their loyalty. Like spending years looking over your shoulder waiting for retaliation that might come from people we haven't even identified yet. Carson's expression went hard. There's no safe choice here, Ms. Vale. Only different kinds of danger. Z stood and walked to the window. Outside, the suburb continued existing in bland normalcy. Someone walked a dog. Someone else retrieved a newspaper. Lives proceeding like the world made sense. I want to talk to Cassian, she said. That can be arranged. Alone. No recording. No agents listening. That's against protocol. I don't care. Z turned to face Carson. You want my cooperation? You want me to testify and help build your case? Then I need 1 hour with my husband, privately. Or I walk. Carson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 1 hour. But if either of you tries to leave this house, my marshals will stop you. Forcibly, if necessary. Understood. Whoops. They brought Cassian to the living room 20 minutes later. He looked worse than at the hospital. Bruises had darkened across his jaw and ribs. His split lip had swollen. He moved carefully, like everything hurt, but his eyes found hers immediately, and something in his expression cracked open with relief. The agents left them alone. Door closed. Cameras off. 1 hour of privacy in a house surrounded by armed protection. Across the room and kissed him carefully around the damaged parts of his mouth. His arms came around her, holding tight enough to hurt her wounded arm. She didn't care. I thought they'd separate us permanently, Cassian said against her hair. They tried. I negotiated. With what leverage? Refusal to cooperate. Z pulled back enough to see his face. Carson wants me to testify. Says they need corroboration for your statements. Someone else who can verify Marcus's pattern of control and coercion. You should refuse. That's not your choice. Don't. She moved to the couch, sat down carefully. Her arm screamed in protest. We need to talk about what happens next, real talk. No protecting each other, no noble sacrifices. Cassian sat beside her, close enough that their knees touched. Okay. Carson says testifying puts Marcus away permanently, makes us safer long term, but it also makes us targets for his associates, people who want revenge or to prove loyalty. Z's hands twisted together in her lap. Witness protection keeps us hidden but doesn't guarantee Marcus won't eventually find us. And if he does, if he somehow tracks us down years from now, we're still looking over our shoulders forever. Those are both terrible options. Every option is terrible. That's the point. Z looked at him directly. So I need to know what you want, really want. Not what you think you should want or what you think protects me best. What do you actually want for us? Cassian was quiet for a long time. Outside, suburban sounds continued. Car doors closing, lawnmowers humming, ordinary life happening to ordinary people. I want to testify, he said finally. I want to stand in court and tell everyone exactly what my father did. What he built. How he controlled people through fear and money and violence disguised as business. His voice roughened. I want him to hear me explain every operation he thought I didn't understand. Every threat he thought I'd forgotten. Every moment he made me complicit in destroying lives. That's revenge talking. That's justice talking. Cassian's hand found hers. My father spent 30 years building an empire on suffering. He ruined families, destroyed businesses, killed people who got in his way, and he did it all while convincing himself he was building something legitimate for me to inherit. You're not responsible for his choices. No, but I'm responsible for stopping them when I had the chance. His thumb moved across her knuckles. I've been cooperating with investigators for 18 months, providing evidence piece by piece while trying to protect myself. That was cowardice. I should have testified publicly from the beginning, should have burned the whole operation down and accepted the consequences. You would have died. Maybe, but at least I would have died doing the right thing instead of living by doing the convenient thing. Cassian looked at her with eyes that carried exhaustion and determination in equal measure. I want to testify. I want to help put him away permanently. And if that makes me a target for revenge, if that means spending the rest of my life watching for retaliation, at least I'll know I did everything possible to stop him. He's absorbed this. Tried to imagine the life he was describing. Years in witness protection, new identities, constant vigilance, never fully relaxing because somewhere Marcus's associates might still be looking. What about us? She asked. What about this marriage? You think we survive that kind of life? I don't know. His honesty hurt more than lies would have. Most couples in witness protection fail. The stress, the isolation, the inability to maintain connections to anything from your past. It destroys relationships. So you're saying this marriage was already doomed. I'm saying it was built on lies and manipulation and desperation. And somehow, despite all that, despite every reason we should hate each other, I love you more than I've loved anything in my entire life. His free hand came up to her face. So maybe we fail. Maybe the stress and isolation destroy us like it destroys everyone else. But at least we'll fail together instead of apart. Z leaned into his touch. That's the least romantic thing you've ever said to me. I'm fresh out of romance. All I have left is truth. Then here's my truth. Z took a breath. I want to testify too. Not because of justice or revenge or noble principles, because I'm angry, furious. Your father used my desperation against me, turned my failing business into leverage, made me complicit in operations I wanted no part of, then tried to murder you at our own wedding. That's a lot. That's everything. Her voice hardened. So yes, I want to testify. I want to stand in court and explain exactly how he manipulated us both. how he built traps disguised as opportunities, how he created situations where every choice led to destruction except the choice to serve him. You'll be giving up your business, your name, everything you built. My business was already dying. My name was already worthless. Everything I built was collapsing before you walked into it. Z's hand tightened on his. The only thing I actually have, the only thing that matters, is this, us, whatever the hell we are. A disaster. A catastrophic disaster. The worst possible outcome. Absolutely the worst. She kissed him carefully. So let's burn the whole thing down together. They told Carson their decision that afternoon. The agent nodded like she'd expected it. Trial preparation starts immediately. We'll need detailed statements, documentation of every interaction with Marcus, timeline of events, everything. How long until trial? Cassian asked. 6 months minimum. Possibly longer if his lawyers file delays. Carson pulled out paperwork. In the meantime, you stay in protective custody. We'll move you to different safe houses every few weeks. Keep your location unpredictable. Can we stay together? Z asked. That's up to you. Some couples find it easier to separate during the preparation period, less stress. We'll stay together, Cassian said. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Carson studied them both. You understand what you're committing to? Years of your life consumed by this trial. Media attention. Threats. The possibility that despite everything, his lawyers find a way to create reasonable doubt. We understand, Z said. And you're willing to accept those consequences? We don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. No. Z stood. Her arm throbbed. Her head ached. She was exhausted and angry and terrified. Marcus Reed took our choices away the moment he decided to turn us into pieces in his game. This isn't about choosing consequences. This is about choosing to fight back. Something that could have been respect flickered across Carson's face. Then, let's get started. The next 6 months became a blur of safe houses and depositions and trial preparation that consumed every waking hour. Z and Cassian lived in temporary spaces that never felt like home, furnished apartments in anonymous buildings where they weren't allowed to form connections or routines. They moved every 3 weeks, different cities, different suburbs, always surrounded by marshals who protected them from threats that never materialized but might always be coming. They learned each other slowly in those months. Not the romantic discovery of new relationships, but the grinding reality of survival under pressure. They learned each other's breaking points, the moments when stress became too much and they needed space instead of comfort, the days when fear paralyzed them and only physical presence helped. Cassian had nightmares about his father, would wake gasping and disoriented, convinced they were still at the wedding venue with guns pointed at them. Z would hold him until the panic passed, whispering details about their current safe house until reality reasserted itself. They had panic attacks triggered by unexpected sounds, car doors slamming, footsteps in hallways. Anything that might signal Marcus's associates had found them. Cassian learned to recognize the signs, her breathing changing, hands clenching, and would pull her into exercises their assigned therapist had taught them. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. They went to couples counseling twice a week with a therapist who specialized in trauma and witness protection. Learned communication tools for handling stress. Practiced conflict resolution for inevitable arguments. Discussed the statistical likelihood their marriage would survive the next 5 years. The odds weren't good. But they kept showing up anyway. 3 months into trial preparation, Z's lawyer finalized the bankruptcy proceedings for Vail Events. The business officially closed. Assets liquidated to pay remaining debts. Her professional reputation, what little remained, became a footnote in articles about the Ree family trial. She sat in a motel room in suburban Indiana reading the final paperwork while Cassian made coffee with the cheap machine provided by the establishment. It's done, she said. Everything I built for 5 years. Gone. I'm sorry. Don't be. Z set the papers aside. That business was built on desperation and poor decisions. Maybe it needed to die. What will you do after, assuming we survive the trial and witness protection? I don't know. She accepted the coffee he handed her. It tasted like burned plastic. Start over somewhere new, maybe not event planning, maybe something completely different. Like what? I always wanted to teach. Design courses, maybe. Or small business management. She laughed bitterly. Teach people how to recognize when their failing business is actually failing instead of pouring everything into prolonging the inevitable. That's specific. That's experience. Z drank more terrible coffee. What about you? What does Cassian Ree do after Cassian Ree stops existing? I don't know either. He sat beside her on the motel bed. Maybe something quiet. Carpentry. Restoration work. Something where I build things with my hands instead of destroying them with information. You didn't destroy things. You helped stop your father from destroying more things. Semantics. His hand found hers. But I appreciate the generous interpretation. They sat together drinking bad coffee and imagining futures that might never exist, trying to believe survival was possible. But the trial began in September. Federal courthouse in downtown Chicago. Media circus outside. Protesters on both sides, some supporting Marcus as a successful businessman being persecuted by government overreach, others celebrating his arrest as justice for communities his operations had damaged. Z and Cassian entered through a back entrance surrounded by marshals wearing bulletproof vests. Inside, the courtroom looked exactly like every legal drama Z had ever seen. Wood paneling and formal seating, and a judge who looked exhausted before proceedings even started. Marcus sat at the defense table wearing an expensive suit and an expression of absolute calm. His eyes found Cassian across the room. No emotion, no acknowledgement, just cold calculation that made Z's skin crawl. The prosecution called Cassian to testify on the third day. Z sat in the gallery watching her husband walk to the witness stand looking smaller than usual. Vulnerable. Every bruise had healed, but the weight of what he was about to do showed in his shoulders. The prosecutor, a woman in her 50s named Chen, who'd built her career on organized crime cases, walked Cassian through 18 months of cooperation. Every meeting with investigators, every document provided, every operation explained. Cassian's voice stayed steady. Clinical. He described his father's money laundering operations with the detachment of someone discussing weather patterns. Explained drug distribution networks like they were supply chain logistics. Detailed human trafficking connections with the emotional distance of a financial analyst. But when Chen asked about the wedding, his composure cracked. My father arranged the entire thing, Cassian said, his voice roughened. Not to celebrate a marriage, to demonstrate control. He wanted to show his associates, everyone in that room, that even his rebellious son could be brought to heel. That even someone trying to escape the family could be trapped through manipulation and leverage. What kind of leverage? Chen asked. Qian. My wife. Cassian's eyes found Z in the gallery. He used her desperation to bind us together, then used our marriage to control both of us. If I continued cooperating with your investigation, he'd destroy her. If she tried to leave, he'd destroy me. We were trapped by the thing that was supposed to represent freedom. And when you signed the contract that night, the agreement requiring you to stop cooperating, what were you thinking? That we'd run out of options, that survival meant accepting his control. Cassian's jaw tightened. I was wrong. Survival meant fighting back even when fighting back looked impossible. The defense attorney, an expensive lawyer named Morrison, who'd made his career defending powerful criminals, stood for cross-examination. Mr. Ree, he said with practiced sympathy, isn't it true that you have significant financial motivations to testify against your father? No. You stand to inherit his business empire if he's convicted and removed from power. I don't want his empire. I want it dismantled. So you say. But documentary evidence shows you've received millions of dollars from family businesses over the years, money you used to build your own companies, money that came from the same operations you're now claiming to oppose. Cassian's hands clenched. I've spent 5 years extracting myself from those operations, separating legitimate businesses from illegal ones, returning money to victims where possible. Very convenient timing, extracting yourself right before cooperating with federal investigators. Morrison moved closer. Isn't it true that you only began cooperating after your father refused to fund your latest business venture? No. Isn't it true that this entire case is motivated by personal conflict between a father and son, not actual evidence of criminal activity? No. Cassian's voice went cold. "This case is motivated by 30 years of my father destroying lives to build power. I'm just the one finally willing to stop pretending it's legitimate business." Morrison smiled. No further questions. Z testified the following week. She walked to the witness stand feeling like she was walking toward execution. Her wedding dress, the blood-stained white silk, sat in an evidence bag marked as Exhibit 47, proof of Marcus's violence, physical evidence of attempted murder. Chen walked her through the entire timeline, the anonymous email offering money, the wedding planning that became increasingly personal, the contract that promised protection while actually delivering a trap. "When did you realize Marcus Ree was manipulating you?" Chen asked. "When I saw the wedding invitation with my name as the bride." Z's voice stayed steady. Everything suddenly made sense. The personal questions, the specific details. Cassian had been planning my wedding while I thought I was planning someone else's. "And how did that make you feel?" "Furious. Betrayed. Used." Z looked at Marcus sitting calm and composed at the defense table, but also validated because it meant I hadn't been imagining the manipulation. It was real, documented, intentional. "What happened at the wedding reception after Marcus discovered you knew about the FBI raids?" "He tried to kill his son." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "He pulled a gun, shot at us. Would have murdered Cassian if I hadn't intervened." "You intervened how?" "I threw myself at him, got shot in the process." Z touched her arm instinctively, the scar beneath her sleeve. "Then Cassian fought him while I went for the gun. Then your agents arrived and arrested everyone." "That must have been terrifying." "It was my wedding reception." Z's voice hardened. "I'd spent 6 months planning every detail, choosing flowers and music and cake flavors, creating something beautiful. And Marcus Ree turned it into a crime scene because his son dared to want freedom." Morrison stood for cross-examination, looking less confident than he had with Cassian. "Ms. Vale," he said, "you accepted $500,000 from the Ree family, correct?" "I accepted payment for professional services. Services that included planning a wedding under false pretenses. Services that included being manipulated and threatened and shot." Z leaned forward slightly. "I was hired to plan a wedding. I delivered on that contract. Everything else, the lies, the manipulation, the violence, that was your client's addition. You could have walked away at any time." "No, I couldn't, because Marcus Ree made sure I was desperate enough to need the money, then used that desperation to trap me in a situation where walking away meant losing everything I'd worked for." "That sounds like a conspiracy theory." "That sounds like your client's business model." Z's eyes found Marcus across the room. "Find desperate people. Offer them solutions that look legitimate. Then use their gratitude and fear to control them. It's what he did to me. It's what he did to his son. It's what he's done to hundreds of people across decades." Morrison's jaw tightened. No further questions. The trial lasted 6 weeks, dozens of witnesses, hundreds of documents, financial experts explaining money laundering, former associates testifying about operations they'd participated in, FBI agents presenting evidence collected over years of investigation. Throughout it all, Marcus sat calm and composed, showing no emotion except occasional disappointment when testimony contradicted his lawyer's theories. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Z and Cassian waited in a hotel room under martial protection, unable to sleep or eat or think about anything except the 12 strangers deciding their future. When the call came that the jury had reached a verdict, they returned to the courthouse holding hands so tight their fingers went numb. The courtroom filled. Media. Observers. Victims of Marcus's operations who'd come to watch justice delivered or denied. The jury foreman stood. "On the count of conspiracy to commit money laundering, we find the defendant guilty." Marcus's expression didn't change. "On the count of racketeering, we find the defendant guilty." Still nothing. "On the count of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty." The list continued. 15 counts. Guilty on 13. Not guilty on 2 for lack of sufficient evidence. Marcus Ree, builder of empires, destroyer of lives, father who'd tried to murder his son, would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. When the judge dismissed the jury, When the marshals moved to take Marcus away, he looked back one final time at Cassian. His expression had finally changed, not to rage or grief or even disappointment, to something that could have been pride if pride hadn't been twisted into approval of the son who'd finally proven strong enough to destroy him. Then, he was gone. But witness protection began 3 weeks later. Z and Cassian became Sarah and James Morrison, bland names attached to bland histories in a bland suburb of Portland, Oregon, where rain fell constantly and nobody asked uncomfortable questions. They bought a small house with money provided by the federal program. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a backyard that needed work. Nothing like the luxury Cassian had grown up with or the artistic spaces Z had once imagined for herself. It was perfect. Z enrolled in teaching certification courses at a local community college, started building a new career helping other people understand design and business. Cassian found work at a furniture restoration shop, quiet labor, that let him build things instead of destroying them. They learned to be ordinary, learned to shop at the same grocery store every week, to wave at neighbors whose names they'd never remember, to maintain jobs and routines and the appearance of normalcy that would keep them invisible. Some days were easier than others. Some days Z would see a woman planning a wedding at the coffee shop where she studied and feel phantom pain from the life she'd left behind. Some days Cassian would hear Korean spoken in a restaurant and freeze, convinced his father's associates had found them. But most days were just days, boring and ordinary and exactly what they'd fought for. 6 months after the trial, they renewed their vows. Not in a venue Z designed, not with flowers and lights and perfect details, just at the courthouse in Portland with a judge who processed their paperwork in 12 minutes and 2 witnesses pulled from the waiting room who didn't know them or care about their story. Afterward, they got ice cream at a shop near the waterfront and watched rain fall on the Willamette River while tourists hurried past under umbrellas. "Do you miss it?" Z asked. "Chicago, your old life, everything, sometimes." Cassian ate his vanilla cone thoughtfully. "I miss the skyline, the architecture, certain restaurants, but I don't miss the fear, the constant calculation, looking at everyone as potential threats or assets." "Do you miss your father?" "He was quiet for a long time. I miss the idea of him, the person he could have been if he'd chosen differently. But the actual man? No. That man tried to kill me, tried to trap you, destroyed countless lives to build something he called an empire." Cassian looked at her. "I mourn what we could have been as a family, but I don't miss what we actually were." Z understood that completely. She mourned the business she'd built, the reputation she'd lost, the name she'd given up. But she didn't miss the desperation, the drowning feeling, the constant terror that everything would collapse. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked. "Long term, despite the statistics." "I have no idea." His honesty still hurt sometimes. "We're 2 damaged people who met under terrible circumstances and built a relationship on lies and survival. The odds aren't good. But we're still here, still choosing each other, still showing up every day despite knowing how badly this could fail." He finished his ice cream. "That has to count for something. It counts for everything." They walked along the waterfront while rain soaked through their clothes and Portland continued existing in gray normalcy around them. 2 people with false names and real scars learning to build something legitimate from the ruins of beautiful lies. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no dramatic resolution, no moment of perfect clarity where all the pain made sense, no guarantee they'd survive the next year, let alone the next decade. Just 2 broken people choosing each other every single day despite knowing exactly how catastrophic that choice might become. And maybe that was enough. Maybe surviving the worst parts of themselves and each other while still choosing to stay was more romantic than any wedding Z could have designed. Maybe love built from wreckage and maintained through conscious choice was stronger than love that came easy. Maybe the best wedding she'd ever been part of wasn't the one she'd designed in secret or the one that ended in federal raids. Maybe it was this. 2 people eating ice cream in the rain, carrying scars and secrets, building ordinary lives from extraordinary damage. Not perfect, not easy, just real. And real, raw, and difficult and honest was exactly what they'd been fighting for all along. 2 years later, Zhu opened a small design consulting business from their home office. Not event planning, not weddings, just helping local businesses with branding and visual identity. Small projects that paid modest fees and required no media attention. She called it Morrison Design Studio. Her new name, her new beginning. Cassian had been promoted to manager at the restoration shop. Spent his days teaching apprentices how to repair damaged furniture, sanding away old finishes, rebuilding broken joints, bringing beauty back to things people had given up on. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them. They still went to therapy, still had hard days, still struggled with the weight of everything they'd survived and everything they'd lost. But they also had moments of unexpected joy. Lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and newspapers, long walks through Portland's endless rain, dinners with neighbors who knew them as Sarah and James and had no idea about the trial or the violence or the empire that had collapsed. On the third anniversary of their courthouse wedding, Z stood in their backyard planting roses, garden roses like the ones her mother had grown decades ago before everything got complicated. Cassian watched from the porch holding 2 glasses of wine. "Why roses?" he asked when she finished. "Because someone once asked me what flowers reminded me of home." Z wiped dirt from her hands, and I said garden roses, my mom's garden, before everything fell apart. Before me. Before you. She took the wine he offered. But also because of you. Because you asked the question. Because you remembered the answer. Because somehow, despite manipulating me into the worst situation of my life, you also gave me a way back to something real. Cassian looked at the roses, small plants that would take years to mature into anything resembling his mother's garden. "Do you forgive me?" he asked quietly. "For how we started, for the lies and manipulation and—" "No," Z interrupted. His expression cracked. "But I understand you," she continued. "I understand why you did it. I understand the desperation and fear and belief that honesty would destroy everything before it started." She moved closer. "And I choose you anyway, not because you deserve forgiveness, because I want to build something with you that's better than what we both came from." "That's not the same as forgiveness." "No, it's better." Z kissed him carefully. "Forgiveness implies I'm letting go of the past. I'm not. I'm carrying it with me, letting it inform how I move forward, using it to build something stronger than what we would have had if we'd started from honesty. That's complicated. That's marriage." She smiled against his mouth. "The real kind. Not the fairy tale I used to design for clients. The messy, difficult, choose each other despite everything kind." They stood together in their small backyard watching roses that would bloom someday if they cared for them properly. Building ordinary lives in extraordinary ways. And somewhere in Chicago, in a federal prison, Marcus Ree served a life sentence for trying to control people who proved stronger than control. The Ree empire had collapsed, associates imprisoned, operations dismantled, decades of power erased by 18 months of cooperation and 6 weeks of testimony. Sometimes Z wondered if Marcus regretted his choices. If sitting in a cell gave him time to understand the cost of treating people like pieces in a game. But mostly she didn't think about him at all, because thinking about Marcus meant living in the past. And Z had spent too many years drowning in past mistakes and desperate choices. Now she had roses to plant, a business to build, a husband who drove her crazy and loved her anyway, a future that looked nothing like what she'd planned but felt more real than any plan could have delivered. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she'd accepted money from a beautiful stranger 6 years ago. It was better, because it was true, scarred and complicated and built from choices that acknowledged damage instead of pretending it didn't exist. The most beautiful wedding she'd ever been part of wasn't the one she'd designed in secrecy or the one that ended in arrests. It was this life, this marriage, this choice to stay despite knowing exactly how hard staying would be. Not perfect, not easy, just real. And real, honest and difficult and worth fighting for was exactly what love looked like when it survived the worst and chose to keep living anyway.